We are gathered here for May Day, for Maharashtra Day, and of course, to remember Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar today. On behalf of the India International Center, the Maharashtra Sanskrit Rananiti Adhyan Samiti, and the Working Group on Alternative Strategies, welcome to the discussion on how do we annihilate caste. We started this series way back in 2010. So this is the 17th edition of that. And it's a series on social justice and empowerment. And we commemorate the life and work of Babasaheb Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. We have a distinguished panel. We have Professor N. Sukumar. He's just going to join us. He's a few minutes away. I mean, peculiar to Delhi traffic. Professor Y.S. Alone, Professor of Visual Studies at the School of Arts and Aesthetics, JNU. Professor Sumeet Mhaskar, who's the Fulbright-Nehru Fellow at the Department of Anthropology, University of Stanford. He's joining us online. Welcome, Sumeet.
Yeah, hello.
Sorry, we have woken up you so early today. What is the time there?
It's 5 o'clock. Yeah.
5 a.m.
Yeah, it's fine.
Good. Okay. Then we have Professor Ramchandra, Professor of Hindi, Center for Indian Languages, JNU. Dr. Rehnamol PR, Associate Professor, Jindal Global Law School, OP Jindal Global University. And Ms. Disha Wadekar, Advocate, Supreme Court of India, and member of the CEDE, Community for the Eradication of Discrimination in Education and Employment. And yours truly, Suhas Borker, is the convener of the Working Group on Alternative Strategies, and I'll be moderating this discussion. There are some ground rules which we have to keep. We'll give 15 minutes max to each speaker. And I can't switch off the mic, but we'll have to tell everybody to restrict to 15 minutes. So now, before that, at every meeting, we honor our artisans. And these artisans are based in Salem in Tamil Nadu. And they produce this beautiful Angavastram, which is called Ganga Jamuna. So it represents our pluralism. There's two colors, Ganga and Jamuna. Down south, they talk of this tehzeeb. In the north, we are forgetting all this. Anyway, that's another story. So I'd like to honor our speakers. So begin with Professor Alone, who's been right through with us since 2010, all the 17 editions. Huh? Come. Professor Ramchandra. Yeah. Yeah, right. Now we have to do the work. So come, you come and write just in time. Come for the Angavastram. Come this way. So we have Professor Sukumar. He's just joined us. Come. So we now, the next ritual we have to do is we have to light the lamp for Babasaheb. If we can just go across and light the lamp, please. Come. Come. I'm writing it for you.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
I always tell my friends from South Africa that they had suffered a declared policy of apartheid. We've been suffering hidden apartheid for thousands of years. It's virtually apartheid only. I just want to take you back to the year 2016. India had sponsored the observation of the birth anniversary of Babasaheb at the UN for the first time. The permanent mission of India to the UN commemorated the 125th birth anniversary of the Dalit icon on April 13th, 2016, at the UN headquarters, a day before his date of birth, with an international seminar on combating inequalities to achieve sustainable development goals. So it was, merged with the SDGs. A note circulated by the Indian mission said that the national icon remains an inspiration for millions of Indians and proponents of equality and social justice across the globe. Fittingly, although it's a matter of coincidence, one can see the trace of Babasaheb's radiant vision in the SDGs adopted by the UN General Assembly to eliminate poverty, hunger, and socioeconomic inequality by 2030. Now, this was the note circulated by the Indian mission at the UN. Now, juxtapose this with the March 2016 report on caste-based discrimination by the United Nations Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur for Minority Issues that stung the Indian government, provoking it to raise questions about the lack of seriousness of work in the UN body and the Special Rapporteur's mandate. Ambedkar, the architect of the Indian Constitution, would definitely not be pleased, nor were the Dalit right activists in India and abroad. Now, this is just a recent example of India's hypersensitivity on discussing the caste issue at any UN forum. The objections raised by the Permanent Mission of India to that March 2016 report, I mean, is just an example. The reporter had characterized caste-based discrimination as that based on descent, labor stratification, untouchability, practices, and forced endogamy, and said that this was a global phenomenon that impacted more than 250 million people worldwide, largely in India. The reporter had cited the India's National Crime Records Bureau data to highlight that there was increasing atrocities against scheduled castes, an increase in reported crimes of 19% compared to the previous years. The report mentioned that despite legislative prohibition of manual scavenging, the state has institutionalized the practice with local governments and municipalities employing manual scavengers. Earlier, at the World Conference Against Racism in Durban, that was way back in 2001, when there was a major effort by Indian NGOs to include casteism on the agenda, the Indian government had vehemently opposed it. Ashok Bharti, the chair of the National Confederation of Dalit and Adivasi Organizations, had then said that the whole government suffers from a mindset of the upper caste that are victims of their own guilt and will therefore try to hide their faults. He said that if the Indian government had done so well in supporting Dalits, why have there been thousands of cases of atrocities in the past so many years? How many perpetrators have been punished? If domestic pressure and remedies do not work, internationalism was a viable option to seek improvement in the status of Dalits. The lesson from all this, which I just mentioned, India must learn that what is then the UN reporter's idea on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. I mean, you have to go beyond the law. I mean, this will all be talked about now. You have to identify, you have to get to identity constructions. How over centuries the Indian identity has been constructed. All forms of discrimination can be traced historically and intellectually. One of the key strategies of the racist discriminating communities is to make us believe that discrimination is natural, that it is a part of nature, and that you have to accept it. This is part of their ideological weapon, and it is obviously not true. Discrimination does not come from the cosmos. Caste-based discrimination can be retraced and deconstructed to combat it. We have to engage in an ethical and intellectual strategy to uproot what is building and creating the culture and mentality of discrimination. I mean, in all these years after independence, Dalit and Adivasis continue to face mind-boggling social discrimination and spine-chilling atrocities across the country. 1 in 4 Indians admits to practicing caste untouchability in some form or another. This shocking fact has been revealed by a survey conducted by the National Council of Applied Economic Research and the University of Maryland in the United States. Indians belonging to virtually every religious and caste group, including Muslims, Christians, scheduled castes, and scheduled tribes, admit to practicing untouchability. This was shown by the Indian Human Development Survey, IHDS2. Mere tokenism and lip service will not do. India needs to jettison the centuries-old dehumanizing baggage of caste stigma once and for all. And it should have, to begin with, it should have nothing to hide, but see this reality as it is and confront the issues involved head on. So I will now open the floor to the speakers. The first to open the innings will be Professor N. Sukumar. He has taken the view that Jat Pat Todak Mandal, in that Ambedkar argued that it is the upper caste who have created the problem of caste. Therefore, they should think seriously about how to annihilate it. Then he put some questions which he will be answering. Are the socially dominant communities willing to break social endogamy? Will state institutional mechanisms initiate to bring a law to annihilate caste? What role does civil society play in this exercise? Destroying, reforming the religious actions by the Savarna communities is the need of the hour. Over to you, Professor Kumar.
Thank you so much. How much time? 15 minutes? 15 minutes. Though it is very less to annihilate caste. Anyway, thank you so much for asking me to be part of this August gathering. Well, whose project is to annihilate caste? Is it all 5 Dalits or 6 Dalits who are sitting here, or let us say former untouchables, or even still untouchability which is prevailing? Is it our responsibility to annihilate caste? And who created the caste? And who is responsible for all the atrocities that are being perpetuated every hour in this society? Are the cultural nationalists responsible for this? So my question starts with that. Instead of asking to us, it should ask the other, that when you are going to initiate the idea of annihilating the caste. It's very age-old. I don't need to give the historical genesis of caste system. It starts from the Rigvedic tradition. But someone who designed this caste, black and white, or a oral tradition, or a systematic written documents which we are strictly following in everyday practices. Why do we follow? And why, how it has its own sustenance? Therefore, that is where, the endogamy, what Ambedkar was clearly mentioned, that because of this, the caste is, able to sustain. And how the social norms that has been created by the priestly caste, maintaining through this kind of practices where it's sustained, also through occupational, divisions. It's, I don't know whether to celebrate today as a Labor Day, where caste is not only division of labor, but division of laborer. Okay, today's significance is that. So therefore, this has been part of the great Indian tradition. We have a very great Indian tradition, that a great cultural values which we try to propagate. And of course, it's a divine origin theory. सबको पता है कौन कहां से जन्म लेता है. शायद इस रूम में किसी को ये नहीं पता होगा that भाई कौन सर से लेता है, कौन छाती से लेता है, कौन यहाँ से लेता है, कौन नीचे से लेता है. Birth is very quite natural. But we believe strongly in a divine origin theory. So in 2017, interestingly, Christoph Jafferlet, who wrote a very interesting piece, The Defenders of Varna, and the nationalists whom we evangelize today, whom We call them as the so-called nationalists in contemporary academic discourse. Let me just say something about who are these nationalists, or who defended the Varna openly. Deen Dayal Upadhyay. Now it is imposed into the syllabus of every Indian university. That's where I will bring Dharmadhikari, the Madras High Court Chief Justice, who recently went on propagating to teach Manusmriti, which becomes the source of perpetuating caste hierarchies. Yes, I do teach Manusmriti in my classroom, but I try to deconstruct it. I try to emphasize that how certain texts need to be interrogated and critically engaged. And that is not the project of the contemporary academic discourse. Let me go through what Deen Dayal Upadhyay says. He says that society is self-born and forms an organic unity inherited from a caste-based antiquarian arrangement that should not be disturbed. So what we are doing here, it goes against what Deen Dayal Upadhyay says, integral humanism. We are trying to question, challenge what Deen Dayal Upadhyay's idea. We should not disturb. And he also says further that in our concept of four castes, there are thoughts of as an analogies to the different limbs of Virat Purush. These limbs are not only complementary to one another, but even further, there is individuality, unity, there is a complete identity of interest, identity of belonging. Now, Ambedkar questioned, is there any sense of belonging? Is there any sense of, unity in this society? And let me go through further to Dayanand Saraswati, an Arya Samajist. He says that he maintained that hereditary jatis did not exist in the Vedic times, but children were placed in different varnas according to their qualities. Through such reasoning, he legitimized a hierarchy imbued with anti-individualistic values. Once in a varna, a man and a woman remained in it. You cannot get out from this kind of fold. You are fixed. By birth and by death, the caste is guaranteed. Often and often, every time reimposed, even if there is an attempt to change or reform, even if you are attempted to convert, there are many anti-conversion laws comes into this system. Then, and there is someone called Madan Mohan Malavya. And he says that for him, caste is not functioning assigned to each class is as its jati dharma, where specialized by different families as their kula dharma, and were faithfully and efficiently performed for the well-being of the whole society, which was thus served by the classes and families composing it. As an organism is served by its constituent organs. So it's a complete defense of the Varna system. Another two reformers or gentlemen, not reformers, sorry, the gentlemen who spoke, who defended on Varna, and then I'll move towards to my proposal that, how it needs to be addressed. K. Munshi, he says that we are blinded by an admiration of the social apparatus of the West, fail to realize that Chaturvarna was a marvelous social synthesis. Such a wonderful invention. We need to feel ashamed about it. Instead of feeling ashamed, we celebrate caste. In my entire 45 years of activist life, first time in Delhi, in the capital of the city, country, I heard Brahmanwad Jindabad. Where we have ahead, where we are heading towards. Are we really able to address the question of caste? Now, Rajagopalachari claims that jati was the most important element in the organization of our society. I don't want to keep on further telling. Gandhi himself says that no, caste is very bad institution. The untouchability needs to be removed, but caste should remain. The way does how do we place the anti-caste intellectual tradition in the classroom debate today, in the public debate today? So therefore, that's why I started the question: who is supposed to annihilate caste? The caste is supposed to be annihilated by the Dvija Varnas by adopting multiple kind of practices which long back Ambedkar, when he proposed annihilation of caste towards the speech which he prepared, which was ultimately not able to deliver due to because the content which was very much problematic to the Jatpat Todak Mandal at that point of time, he himself said that look, it is he proposed that there are many remedies. Caste is what exactly the caste means and how to address this caste problem. He himself has given, he raised the question and he has given the solution to the society. There is nothing new for us to find out to annihilate caste. He has given us answer, very much answer towards to the society. And so therefore, the problem of caste is very serious, dangerous, and does not stand, for equality, justice, liberty, rights. And annihilation of caste is solely the project of caste elites, not Rehnamol, not Ramchandra, not Aloni, not Disha, or not Sukumar. It is the project of everybody sitting in this room. And therefore, what I say that the cultural nationalists, we get hyper when it comes to the idea of nation, nationalism, culture. The project is to be addressed by these cultural nationalists, self-proclaimed Bhagavans, who valorizes manual scavenging, Karma Yogi. You need to read a book called Karma Yogi, and you will understand that why this valorization of caste by the ruling elites. They might have come from Shudra community, but they are again ruling elites who are perpetuating the caste values, the casteist values. Last 2 points. Can we say that by organizing Samajik Samarasta or whatever the idea of the RSS, Panchaparivartan, one temple, one well, one cremation, why not one nation, one caste? Though I don't subscribe the idea of caste. I don't know, I would really love to hear that. Why bolo, dam hai to? Kahan, kyun dar hai? Kahan se, kyun? Why you are scared to say that, okay, हम सब लोग एक ही है? But the question remains still, why is Indian society does not obtain anti-caste laws? There are laws. 2026 UGC regulation and the highest institutions like judiciary, we know how it interprets, as if that Indian society never been divided. भैया बांट के छोड़ दिया आप लोग सालों से, हजारों सालों से. क्या 2026 UGC regulation सिर्फ बांटेगा society को? This is absolutely obnoxious. And what is the need of the hour? As I said, that radical empathy. We don't have the idea of cultivate. We never cultivate the idea of radical empathy. We extend sympathy. I mean, in the report which NCDR, it is the, I don't know, maybe you can go back and look into this 5 years of caste-based atrocities, and this entire data which is available in the website, okay, is the government, the government data. This data compiled and interpreted that analysis of the crimes against scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in India from 2019 to 2023. So the ways to address the caste question, therefore, that's what Ambedkar, ultimately realized that. So just one कर लीजिए 2 minute में खत्म करूंगा. If I am. See, the idea of constitution was the only remedy what Ambedkar strongly felt. He proposed the idea of annihilation of caste. He realized that caste and religion are like two sides of the same coin, until unless if there is a cultural revolution where the religion need to be completely dismantled, then only the caste question can be dismantled. And he realized that there is less time which is left. So therefore, he headed towards to the idea of addressing the caste question, at least that could be that neutralizes the relationship through some kind of legal remedies, institutional framework, constitutional framework, which again has been completely failed. And who failed this? Who is responsible of failing this constitution? So every institution for that matter, even the civil society, within quotes, the civil society, which we are living in an uncivil society. If what Borker Sahab was mentioning, that in every hour, in every day, that atrocities are prevailing on scheduled caste, it is nothing but as a it's a collective shame, I call it as. Then lastly, when there were attempts towards see, you have constitution, and the constitution guarantees you at least, to convert into other religion, and other religions also is not scot-free about from the caste person. Other religions, therefore long back Ambedkar said, the caste wherever it migrates, wherever Hindu people migrate, the caste migrates. Whether it is Europe, whether it is Canada, whether it is US, or whether it is any other religion. So this migration is one of the things where a serious problem where caste moves. So right to religion through conversion, through anti-conversion bills, you are trying to prevent. You want to keep intact. Therefore, the defenders of Varna who defended that time, and now we have defenders of Varna in every institutional mechanism. So therefore, you don't have freedom of faith where you can think that at least I might get liberated. I might, within quotes, if I convert into Christianity or convert into Islam or even convert into Buddhism or wherever it may. So that is also completely blocked. And suppose endogamy. And when people are trying to marry, to break this caste barriers, the model state of the nation, Gujarat, comes with a Registration of Marriage Act 2026. It makes mandatory of the parents' consent. Is there any parent in this room? Probably we are all conscious citizens, that's why. Is there any parents who will give consent if your children goes against your will and get married to other castes? What kind of mechanism that these institutions are building? So to conclude, Ambedkar strongly believed there is nothing new what a Sukumar can say or anybody can say. I don't know. I can claim, I can say from my side that there is nothing new to be proposed to annihilate caste. The radical empathy which Ambedkar was trying to emphasize, the social endosmosis, a collective, is there any sense of collectiveness, unity, and that is where what he says that. How to, he gave multiple, solutions towards the caste question. And it is us who is supposed to take this idea ahead. And in this process, not only the society, civil society, but also the state and its institutions. If not, then there need to be a serious introspection that what should be done from each and every individual's perspective or sense. There could be many contradictions in accepting this, but if there is a way, if there is a will, there is a way. The only thing is that one need to seriously empathize rather than sympathize. Thank you so much, sir, for asking me to be part of it. I haven't presented any data, which I have got much data, but We don't have time, so maybe some of our
Thank
friends
you.
might
Thank you
chip
very
in.
much.
Thank you so much.
It's a very passionate innings which you have opened. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to Sumeet. Sumeet, are you there?
Yes, very much. Yeah, yeah. No.
Yeah. Put him on the screen. Yeah. Now Sumeet is joining us from Stanford. He's going to say something which is very candid, and he says that we must first of all acknowledge the persistence of caste as a pervasive social institution, which Professor Sukumar also mentioned, across all spheres of life: social, political, economic, and cultural. And this system continues to generate structural advantage for the dominant groups while imposing systemic disadvantages on the marginalized. While state intervention is indispensable, annihilation of caste demands a collective societal effort to dismantle the caste system. The burden of this transformation cannot rest solely on the marginalized. It requires an active, sustained commitment from those in socially superior and dominant positions to dismantle the very system that benefits them. Go ahead, Shwet.
Yes. Thank you, Suhasji, for this invitation. I think I have always admired this effort of organizing the May Day event, and especially remembering Babasaheb Ambedkar's role. And today's topic that you have chosen is how do we annihilate caste? And I think there will be, some of these repetitions, and I think I'll take up from a cue from Sukumar that we is the what is written in the Constitution of India, we the people of India, and I think it is the we the people of India who should be taking up the cause of annihilating the caste. Now, whether that is happening or not, of course, we all know these contradictions. But firstly, I would like to also say that it is important to talk about caste annihilation on Labor Day. And this is a very unique topic that you have chosen, which probably has not been really discussed much as far as Labor Day celebrations are concerned, because caste system and its functioning is very much at the heart of this division of laborers, and therefore to talk about annihilation of caste itself on the Labor Day is an absolutely important intervention. Now, of course, you, Swaji, when you spoke about the United Nations report and the United Nations celebration of Ambedkar Jayanti, both in some way were placing these contradictory things together. On one hand, celebrating it, but on the other hand, the stark reality of various kind of discrimination and atrocities are prevalent. Sukumar also mentioned, and I'm sure the other speakers will also highlight aspects of discrimination. But discrimination or similar kind of exclusions are merely symptoms of caste system. And there have been historically social reformers before Babasaheb Ambedkar who talked about the problem of untouchability, the problem of discrimination. But to talk about the destruction of caste system, the annihilation of caste system, I think Ambedkar is making a sharp distinction from the rest of the people who were talking mostly about the symptoms that come out of caste system, and not necessarily addressing the heart of the problem or the source of where these things come from. Ambedkar, clearly highlights that, there is this shastras which actually give the legitimacy to the acts of people who behave in a particular manner. But the first part, and I think that remains still very important, is that we need to still have more acknowledgement of the persistence of caste. Because even today, there are people who will continue to deny that caste prevails, that its practices are very much prevalent in various spheres of our life, whether it's society, economy, politics, or cultural life. And this denial comes not, of course, it comes from one particular variant of ideology, which Sukumar highlighted very passionately. But I must also submit that across ideologies, this particular kind of phenomena exists where you have more denial of caste. Of course, caste is changing because as society changes, caste will also continue to change. So, therefore, we cannot say that nothing remains stagnant. But the most important part here is that the caste system adopts itself to the changing economic, social, and political structures. And it is this adaptation of caste system which actually continue to use advantages for the socially superior and dominant castes and disadvantages for the socially oppressed groups. And there is enough data to show that this particular kind of advantages, whether it is in form of the job market, that you have more dominance of the socially superior groups, and there is massive discrimination that prevails in the labor market. uh, Kumar also has highlighted about judiciary, and there will be discussion on it, that how judiciary itself is not, it does not function as per whatever standards of merit are concerned. The judges appoint themselves, and there is, of course, long history to that. And of course, there are other institutions. So even though once we there is some kind of acknowledgement that is there, even in public life there will be certain kind of individuals who will deny it, but by and large, at least the acknowledgement is there. And yet the steps to take to annihilate that is, of course, missing very much here. And the burden of this has largely been put on the socially oppressed groups. So we have less efforts from the socially superior and dominant caste to talk about the dismantling of it. And much of this withering away of caste, the discussion that caste is not there very much, is to make a distinction between the functional hierarchy, which is very much required for any civilized society, compared to what Babasaheb Ambedkar said, the division of laborers, which is not necessarily based on the natural aptitudes or trained capacities, but based on individual social status. And as long as that principle operates, we will consistently have advantages being produced and disadvantages. And much of what ends up being discussing when we talk about caste annihilation in the present day discourse is to talk more about the disadvantages. But what we need to also highlight very forcefully is that it actually produces advantages. And without producing advantages, the system cannot thrive. And and these advantages also means that these are beneficiaries of it. The second point is about the social and political reform. Of course, historically, the debate whether political reform should come first or social reform should come first was hotly debated, and Babasaheb Ambedkar was very much the vocal about social reform as a very important step. And his words have pretty much come true. Like after 70 years of our nation building post independence era, we see that yes, we had political reforms, we had a functioning electoral democracy. It has not transformed into substantive democracy, that the fruits of the democracy has not reached to the wider masses. But it only reminds us that social reform is absolutely necessary. And without having social reform, we have built up a particular kind of political system which only reproduces inequalities. Again, advantages for the socially superior and dominant caste, and disadvantages for the socially marginalized groups. And in today's context, the political democracy itself is undergoing a major challenge. And all these various caste divisions are being used, or one can say misused, to actually subvert the kind of political democracy that was so laboriously built by then Constituency Assembly. Now, again, who is supposed to do this annihilation? Of course, the answer is clear that we, the people of India, and this involves everyone, which is you have the socially superior dominant caste who pretty much occupy all the important positions in society, economy, and politics. It is their equal role. Now, whether they will give up that particular kind of privileges that benefits them, now that is the question that needs to be highlighted. That there are advantages and the advantages needs to be highlighted. Of course, we need to talk about discrimination, we need to talk about exclusion, but without talking about advantages, we may not be able to address the problem of caste in a complete manner. The last 2 points are about the civil society. Now, so far, the annihilation of caste has largely been discussed by the anti-caste civil society and anti-caste Ambedkarite civil society. What we have is the other forms of civil societies that are very much prevalent. This may include what we consider as very much moderate civil societies, some radical societies, and progressive civil societies. For them, still caste is not seen as a major problem, and what they are consistently talking is about giving a secondary role to the problem of caste. For example, class is one of the important category of analysis. That class is a problem that needs to be discussed. And so far what we have, the anti-caste civil society has achieved is to make sure, to ensure that uh, caste as a problem has to be acknowledged, which has been now finally acknowledged at least in several quarters. But what even now what happens is that caste is given a secondary status, that yes, caste is a problem that needs to be analyzed, but eventually we have to deal with the problem of the class. And I think this role of assigning the role of secondary to the caste itself creates all kinds of problems. And therefore, different kinds of groups, whether they are on the progressive side or of course on the regressive side, somehow there is a common link that they both somehow are not necessarily talking at the heart of the caste, which is, to challenge the legitimacy of the caste, which is comes from the various shastras and various religious texts, and that needs to be continuously challenged, and only through those that we can actually move towards the annihilation of caste. And on this note, I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sumeet, for that intervention. Now we go to Professor Ramchandra, and he raised a very moot point. What kind of society, country, and nation do we aspire to build? To what extent caste is an obstacle to nation building? I mean, obviously, it's a number one obstacle. And you can't have whatever you call it, Viksit Bharat or something, without annihilating caste. You're fooling yourself if you think that you can be a developed nation and you have this albatross around your neck for thousands of years, where caste is such a discriminating impact on everyday existence of a large number of our citizens. Good.
धन्यवाद सुहास। प्रिय सम्मानित साथियों, आज हम एक ऐसे महापुरुष को याद कर रहे हैं जिन्होंने जाति की अमानवीयता की वजह से हिंदू धर्म छोड़कर बौद्ध धर्म ग्रहण कर लिया था, और आज बुद्ध पूर्णिमा है। यह बहुत संयोग की बात है कि आज हम उनको याद कर रहे हैं। हम जाति का उन्मूलन कैसे करें? अगर हम इस बात को यहाँ से शुरू करें कि हम जाति का विनाश या उन्मूलन क्यों चाहते हैं, और इसमें कौन सी ऐसी बात है जो हमें इसे खत्म कर देना चाहिए? क्या हम एक राष्ट्र बन सके हैं? स्वतंत्रता मिले हुए कितने वर्ष हो गए? क्या हम एक लोकतांत्रिक व्यवस्था में रह रहे हैं? विकसित भारत के बनने में कौन सी बाधाएं हैं जिनकी वजह से इस देश में सामाजिक लोकतंत्र नहीं स्थापित हो सका है? हम कब विकसित देशों की श्रेणी में आएंगे? यह बात हमारे दो वक्ताओं ने बाबा साहब के माध्यम से बताया है कि जिस देश में सोशल डेमोक्रेसी न हो, सामाजिक लोकतंत्र न हो, वह देश विकसित देशों की श्रेणी में कभी भी नहीं आ सकता है। ये बाबा साहब ने अपने आंदोलनों से, अपने परिवर्तन करने वाले तमाम तरह के स्वरूपों से जान लिया था कि इस देश में बदलने वाला कुछ भी नहीं है, फिर भी संविधान के माध्यम से बहुत सारी चीजें बदल सकती हैं, ऐसा उन्हें विश्वास था। दूसरी बात मेरी यह है कि सामाजिक आर्थिक असमानता वाला देश कैसे राष्ट्र बनेगा, कैसे नेशन बनेगा? हम राष्ट्र निर्माण की प्रक्रिया पर बात कर रहे हैं। जो सोशियो रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटीज हैं इस देश में, जो कास्ट हेजमनी को अपना अहम हिस्सा बना के रखा है उन्होंने, और उसी आधार पर लाखों लोगों को अपमानित करते हैं, उनको घृणा की नज़र से देखते हैं, उनके साथ हिंसक बर्ताव करते हैं, अवमानना के चरम तक जाते हैं और एक असमान समाज को जन्म देते हैं। और उसको पुष्ट करने वाले कौन से ऐसे प्रावधान हैं जो उसको प्रमाणित करते हैं, जो उसको बनाए रखना चाहते हैं? निश्चित तौर पर बाबा साहब ने उसको चिन्हित किया था। कुछ ग्रंथ हैं, कुछ शास्त्र हैं जो उसको परंपरागत ढंग से हमारे सामने, हमारी परंपरा में, हमारे संस्कारों में डाल रखा है। मैं इस बात को प्रमाणित करने के लिए, इस बात को पुख्ता तौर पर बताने के लिए आपके समक्ष कुछ उदाहरण देना चाहता हूं कि हम एक ऐसे देश के नागरिक हैं, ऐसे सिविल सोसाइटी के लोग हैं कि हमारी नज़रों के सामने ऐसी घटनाएं घटित होती हैं, लेकिन कोई आंदोलन नहीं होता है। आंदोलन वे करते हैं जो सफरर हैं, जो भुक्तभोगी हैं, जिन्होंने जाति बनाई, जो जाति का आनंद ले रहे हैं। वे कभी इसका विरोध क्यों करेंगे? लेकिन उन्हीं में से ऐसे लोग हैं जो यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं, जिनकी चिंताएं हैं कि यह जात खत्म होनी चाहिए, इसका विनाश होना चाहिए। यह एक बहुत बड़ी उम्मीद है और यह कार्यक्रम भी उस उम्मीद को बढ़ाता है। मैं याद दिलाऊं कि भारत के सर्वोच्च न्यायालय, सुप्रीम कोर्ट के चीफ जस्टिस ऑफ इंडिया के ऊपर भरी अदालत में जूता फेंका गया। कहा गया जूता फेंक कर मारने की कोशिश की गई। एक ऐसा देश, आज़ादी के इतने साल बाद ये घटना हुई और देश में कोई हलचल ही नहीं हुई। सिविल सोसाइटी की ओर से, हमारे नागरिकों की ओर से, कुछ सफरर जो कम्युनिटीज हैं उनकी ओर से कुछ आवाज़ें उठी, कुछ सोशल मीडिया में बातें उठी, बात खत्म हो गई। ना तो कोई राजनीतिक हलचल हुई, कुछ नहीं हुआ। ऐसी घटना मद्रास हाई कोर्ट के जज की है, जिन्होंने अपने ही कुलीग, अपने ही न्यायिक सहयोगी के ऊपर आरोप लगाया, दो सहयोगियों के ऊपर, कि वो मेरे साथ जातिगत भेदभाव करते हैं। सुप्रीम कोर्ट में शिकायत किया तो उन्हें कोलकाता हाई कोर्ट भेज दिया गया। जब वहां से उन्होंने जुडिशरी में करप्शन का आरोप लगाया तो उन्हें 6 महीने के लिए जेल में बंद कर दिया गया। यह इस देश की पहली घटना है जब इस तरह से चीजें हुई। कौन ईमानदार बनना चाहेगा? ऐसे ही अभी हमारे दिल्ली राजधानी के सटे हुए प्रदेश में एक वरिष्ठ पुलिस अधिकारी को जातिगत उत्पीड़न की वजह से आत्महत्या करनी पड़ी। उसी प्रदेश में एक नए पुलिस अधिकारी को अपनी शादी में घुड़चढ़ी के लिए उन्हें ढेर सारे फोर्स का इंतजाम करना पड़ा। इसी राजधानी के सटे हुए बड़े प्रदेश की एक महिला मुख्यमंत्री रही, जब मुख्यमंत्री थी, उनके मुख्यमंत्रित्व काल में ही हजारों की भीड़ में पश्चिम उत्तर प्रदेश में जनसभा में उन्हें जातिगत गालियां दी गई। तब भी इस देश में कोई बवाल नहीं मचा, कोई आंदोलन नहीं हुआ। शैक्षणिक संस्थानों में तमाम विद्यार्थियों और शोधार्थियों के साथ रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में जातिगत उत्पीड़न होते हैं। हर विश्वविद्यालय में प्रकोष्ठ बने हुए हैं, वहां पर आप डेटा देख सकते हैं। जेलू जैसी जगह में भी ढेर सारे आंकड़े आपको मिल जाएंगे। वे छात्र छात्राएं जिनकी ढेरों संख्या है आत्महत्या करते हैं या ड्रॉप आउट हो जाते हैं। ऐसे ही तमाम इस देश में हर रोज जो डेटा पेश किया गया, जिसमें तमाम तरह के अपराधों में बलात्कार, नंगा करके घुमाना, घर और झोपड़ी का जला दिया जाना, इतनी घटनाएं हैं। और एनसीआरबी का डेटा बताता है कि 97% मुकदमे, ऐसे मुकदमे अभी भी अदालत में पेंडिंग हैं। हम ऐसी अदालत के संरक्षण में जी रहे हैं। ये है हमारी अदालतें जिसमें इस तरह के उत्पीड़न के शिकार लोगों को 97% मामले अभी भी नहीं सुलझ सके हैं। इसी देश में जिस इंडिया गेट को कर्तव्य पथ नाम दिया गया है, वहां पर संविधान की, इसी दिल्ली के अंदर राजधानी में संविधान की प्रतियां जलाई जाती हैं और कोई दंडित नहीं करता है। इसी देश में गांधी की तस्वीर को सामने रख करके सार्वजनिक रूप से उस पर लाल रंग का खून लगा करके गोली मारी जाती है, पिस्टल चलाया जाता है और उसको बहुत सेलिब्रेट किया जाता है। डॉक्टर अंबेडकर ने भी 25 दिसंबर 1927 को एक ग्रंथ जलाया था। इस संविधान के जलाने को और डॉक्टर अंबेडकर के उस दहन को आप समानांतर रख के देखें तो इतने दिनों बाद आज़ादी का अर्थ समझ में आएगा। ये हमारे सामने छोटे से आंकड़े हैं, इस पर ज़्यादा विस्तार से जाने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं, आप सब जानते हैं। लेकिन हमारी चुप्पी इस देश में क्यों है, यह चिंताजनक है। 13 अक्टूबर सन 1935 को महाराष्ट्र के नासिक जिले के येवला नामक गांव में डॉक्टर अंबेडकर को यह क्यों घोषणा करनी पड़ी थी कि मैंने जिस धर्म में जन्म लिया है उस धर्म में मरूंगा नहीं। और 14 अक्टूबर 1956 को उन्होंने धर्म बदल दिया। वो 22 प्रतिज्ञाएं बताती हैं कि क्या कारक रहे होंगे कि उन्होंने धर्म बदला होगा। तो ये जो अपमान सहना पड़ा डॉक्टर अंबेडकर को, और उस अपमान के बाद जो धर्म बदलना पड़ा, वो बताता है कि जिन्होंने जाति बनाई, जिन्होंने वर्ण बनाया, जिन्होंने श्रेणीबद्ध इनइक्वालिटी का पूरी व्यवस्था दी, उस व्यवस्था बनाने वाले लोग क्या चाहते हैं? तो चाहते हैं कि जाति का विनाश न हो, सभी अपनी अपनी जातियों को माने और समरस होकर रह लें। बिना असमानता को खत्म किए समरस कैसे हो सकता है कोई देश? अगर नहीं होगा तो वह राष्ट्र नहीं बनेगा। यह मेरा पूरे इत्मीनान, पूरे विश्वास के साथ मैं बात कह रहा हूँ। फुले ने गुलामगिरी लिखी, उसके पीछे के इतिहास को आप सब जानते हैं। हमारे संतों ने, खासतौर से रैदास, कबीर, ऐसे आदि संतों ने जिस व्यवस्था को, जो असमान व्यवस्था थी, उसको अपनी वाणियों में चिन्हित किया, संवेदनशील समाज बनाने की पूरी कोशिश की, लेकिन वह समाज कहाँ है? 2500 साल पहले सिद्धार्थ गौतम से महामानव तथागत गौतम बुद्ध बने, जिन्होंने वर्ण आधारित व्यवस्था और भाषा के वर्चस्व को चुनौती दी, जो अछूत तो नहीं थे, लेकिन उन्होंने लंबे समय तक, उनके अनुयायियों ने, जो इसी देश के उच्च कुलीन लोग थे, वर्चस्व के शिखर वाले लोग थे, जिन्होंने बदलने की कोशिश की, वो हमारे सामने बड़ा उदाहरण है। उस उदाहरण को देख के लगता है कि इस देश में जिन्होंने व्यवस्था बनाई, अगर वो तर्कशील बन गए तो व्यवस्था निश्चित तौर पर बदली जा सकती है। बदलना उन्हीं को होगा, दूसरा कोई अपने सर्वाइवल के लिए अधिकारों के लड़ता रहेगा, व्यवस्था बदलेगी नहीं। अगर ऐसा होता तो डॉक्टर अंबेडकर को अपने धर्म को छोड़ने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ी होती। इसका उदाहरण है 1936 में, जब लाहौर की संस्था जिसका जिक्र सुकुमार जी कर रहे थे, कि जात पात तोड़क मंडल ने बाबा साहब को अपने वार्षिक सम्मेलन का अध्यक्ष बनाया था और भाषण देने के लिए आमंत्रित किया था। बाबा साहब ने अपनी स्पीच भेज दिया था। उसको पढ़ने के बाद उसमें कुछ बदलाव की कोशिश की गई, खासतौर से धर्मशास्त्रों की जो आलोचना थी उसको बदलने की बदलने के लिए कहा गया था। उन्होंने कहा कि मैं ऐसे ही भाषण पढ़ूंगा, मैं कोई बदलाव नहीं करूंगा, वह प्रोग्राम ही रद्द कर दिया गया था। यह उदाहरण है कि यह व्यवस्था नहीं बदलना चाहती है अपने आप को। और वहीं से एनिहिलेशन ऑफ कास्ट की बात वह बाद में किताब के रूप में छपी, बाद में गांधी जी के साथ उस पर बहस हुई, उसमें इंडेक्स आप में मिलती हैं सारी चीज़ें। यह है हमारा सभ्य समाज, हमारा सभ्य देश, महान देश, जब हम राष्ट्र की ओर बढ़ रहे हैं। 2047 जब 100 वर्ष होगा तो हम किस तरह का सेलिब्रेशन करेंगे मुझे नहीं पता, मैं रहूं न रहूं, लेकिन जो उत्पीड़न, अत्याचार, अपमान के जो प्रमाण हमने अभी तक में जो छोटा मोटा हमने बताया आपके सामने, उसको पुष्ट करने के लिए मैं अपने एक प्रिय कवि ओम प्रकाश वाल्मीकि की 2-4 पंक्तियों से, काव्योक्तियों से मैं आपके सामने रखना चाहता हूं पंक्तियों को। एक कविता है, वे भूखे हैं, वे भूखे हैं पर आदमी का मांस नहीं खाते, प्यासे हैं पर लहू नहीं पीते, नंगे हैं पर दूसरों को नंगा नहीं करते, उनके सिर पर छत नहीं है पर दूसरों के लिए छत बनाते हैं। ऐसे लोगों के साथ हम कितना अमानवीय हैं और कैसा अमानवीय समाज हम बना रहे हैं, ये हमें पुनर्विचार करने की आज जरूरत है। डॉक्टर अंबेडकर ने अपनी पुस्तक एनिहिलेशन ऑफ कास्ट नामक जो उनका संदर्भ है जाति के उन्मूलन के लिए, उसमें एकदम साफ तौर पर राय देते हैं। हम सब ने पढ़ा है और भारत सरकार ने उसको छापा है। उसके पहले भाग के पृष्ठ संख्या 87 पर लिखते हैं कि मेरी राय में इसमें कोई संदेह नहीं कि जब तक आप अपनी सामाजिक व्यवस्था को नहीं बदलेंगे तब तक कोई भी प्रगति नहीं होगी। आप समाज को रक्षा या अपराध के लिए प्रेरित कर सकते हैं, लेकिन जाति व्यवस्था की नींव पर आप कोई निर्माण नहीं कर सकते। आप राष्ट्र का निर्माण नहीं कर सकते, आप नैतिकता का निर्माण नहीं कर सकते। जाति व्यवस्था की नींव पर आप कोई भी निर्माण करेंगे वह चटक जाएगा और कभी भी पूरा नहीं होगा। इस बात को हमें आज याद रखना होगा। न्यायपालिका, विधायिका, कार्यपालिका से जुड़े हमारे तमाम वरिष्ठ लोगों के साथ जो भेदभाव हुए, इन वजहों से इनको देखते हुए लगता है कि आम आदमी कैसे जी सकता है, आम आदमी कैसे रह रहा होगा। इसलिए मैंने कहा कि हम इस तरह की व्यवस्था में राष्ट्र का निर्माण नहीं कर सकते। एक समृद्ध और प्रबुद्ध भारत के लिए जाति का उन्मूलन बहुत जरूरी है। यह सुखद है कि हम इस पर गंभीरता से विचार कर रहे हैं। मैं अब अपने कुछ बिंदुओं के आधार पर इसके उन्मूलन के लिए कुछ सुझाव देना चाहता हूं, और जो सुझाव मैं दे रहा हूं वो मेरे प्रिय विद्यार्थियों के दिए हुए उनमें से ज़्यादातर हैं। जिनसे मैं इत्तेफाक रखता हूं वे मेरे प्रिय विद्यार्थी जो दलित साहित्य नामक पाठ्यक्रम जेएनयू में पढ़ते हैं, आज यहाँ मौजूद हैं। उनकी मौजूदगी में उनके अपने दिए गए सुझावों को आपके समक्ष रखना चाहता हूँ। इसमें मेरे भी अपने सुझाव शामिल हैं। सबसे पहली बात है कि डॉक्टर अंबेडकर ने जो एजुकेट, एजुकेट एंड ऑर्गेनाइज का जो नारा दिया था, उसमें एजुकेशन जो है, शिक्षा बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। प्रश्न यह है कि कैसी शिक्षा। इस देश में सब कुछ एक करने की बात हो रही है, 1 नेशन 1 इलेक्शन, लेकिन एक समान शिक्षा की बात नहीं हो रही है। गरीब अमीर का बच्चा एक साथ पढ़े, एक तरह की शिक्षा मिले, उसको फ्री शिक्षा मिले, इस पर बात नहीं हो रही है। जब तक यह नहीं होगा तब तक हम अपने राष्ट्र बनने के राष्ट्र बनाने के तरफ हम कदम नहीं बढ़ा सकते। इसलिए पहला सुझाव यह है कि हमें शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में शैक्षिक समानता जरूरी है। उसके साथ साथ शैक्षिक पाठ्यक्रम, एजुकेशनल जो हमारे कोर्सेज होंगे, जो बचपन से हमें पढ़ाया जाता है, घर में जो संस्कार दिए जाते हैं, उसको हमारे शिक्षण संस्थान जिसमें कुछ समय के लिए हमारे स्टूडेंट्स मिलते हैं, उसमें हम कितना बदल सकते हैं, और बदलने में हमारे टीचर्स की कितनी भूमिका है। टीचर्स अगर उसी मानसिकता के हैं जो एक मानसिक रोग लेकर आते हैं, तो कितना बदल पाएंगे। तो उनको भी ट्रेनिंग देने की जरूरत है, उनको भी प्रशिक्षित करने की जरूरत है। इसे हम सोशल साइंसेज और लिटरेचर के कोर्सेज में विशेष तौर से लागू करके हम उनको साइंटिफिक तर्कशील बना सकते हैं। दूसरी बात जो बहुत जरूरी है कि हम अपनी अपनी जात के पहचान कराने वाले सरनेम लगाते हैं, उस सरनेम को अपनी गाड़ियों पर भी लिख लेते हैं, नियम कानून बनते हैं फिर भी नहीं हटाते हैं। तो इस देश में धर्म की पहचान छोड़ करके जो जाति की पहचान वाले सरनेम हैं, उनको पॉलिटिकल कमिटमेंट के माध्यम से हमारी राजनीतिक पार्टी को, सरकारों को उसको हटा देना चाहिए, अपने किसी कॉलम में नहीं भरना चाहिए। यूजीसी की परीक्षाओं में SC ST OBC लिख करके सर्टिफिकेट दिया जाता है, उसको भी खत्म किया जाना चाहिए। जो जातिगत भेदभाव के जो दुष्परिणाम हैं वह शैक्षिक और सामाजिक स्तर पर कैसे दूर किए जाएं, इसके लिए सरकार के साथ साथ आम जनमानस भी कार्यशालाओं का, वर्कशॉप का आयोजन करे और उसको प्रोत्साहित करे कि खत्म हो। जो इंटरकास्ट मैरिजेज के लिए, अंतर्जातीय विवाह के लिए बाबा साहब ने सुझाव दिया था, उसको इतने वर्ष बाद भी क्यों नहीं हम अचीव कर सके, इस पर विचार करना चाहिए। उसको कैसे प्रोत्साहन और संरक्षण मिले, इस पर विचार करें हम। और ऑनर किलिंग को कैसे खत्म करें। मुझे आश्चर्य है कि ऑनर किलिंग पर कोई भी सरकार सख्त रवैया अपनाती नहीं, यहाँ तक कि हमारी न्यायपालिका भी इसको बहुत सही ढंग से, सख्त तरीके से हमें न्याय नहीं देती। इस देश में बहुत बगल के प्रदेशों में, आसपास की जगहों पर जो घटनाएं घटित होती हैं, सरकारें चुप रहती हैं। ऐसी पुस्तकें, ऐसे धर्म ग्रंथ जो हमें असमानता का पाठ पढ़ाते हों, ऐसे उनमें भाव हों, उन पर पुनर्विचार हो और सरकारें, संस्थाएं, जुडिशरी इस पर पुनर्विचार करे, आम जनमानस, सिविल सोसाइटी उस पर विचार करे कि कैसे उसको हम आम जनमानस में उसको न लागू करने दें, उसको कैसे खत्म करें, इस पर विचार करें। ये इस देश में जो रिप्रेजेंटेशन का, सहभागिता का जो मुद्दा है वो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। सभी सरकारों ने अपने कमिटमेंट के साथ इसको लागू नहीं किया इस देश के अंदर, इसीलिए आज हम ऐसी स्थिति में हैं। आज भी यूनिवर्सिटीज में और तमाम सरकारी संस्थाओं में NFS, नॉन फाउंड सुटेबल कैंडिडेट बना दिया जाता है। इस देश में आप गणना कर लीजिए, किसी विश्वविद्यालयों में SC ST कितने वाइस चांसलर्स हैं। अगर ऐसे वाइस चांसलर्स नहीं हैं तो हम कैसी न्याय संगत व्यवस्था को हम बनाना चाहते हैं, ये पता चलता है। जो इस देश के अंदर असमानता बढ़ाने वाले, डिग्निटी को ठेस पहुंचाने वाले जो पेशेगत कार्य हैं, जिसके बारे में जिसकी तरफ संकेत किया था सुकुमार जी और दूसरे साथी ने, उसको डिग्निफाइड मैनर में कैसे संचालित किया जाए, श्रम का कैसे सम्मानजनक मूल्य निर्धारित किया जाए, किसी भी पेशे को जाति से कैसे बाहर कर दिया जाए, इस तरह की परंपराओं को, मैला ढोने की प्रथा को, और सीवर में कमाने के लिए, सीवर में मरने के लिए जो बाध्य किया गया है, हमारी व्यवस्था ने किया, उसे कैसे मुक्त हुआ जाए, इसके लिए सभी को सोचने की जरूरत है। सरकार भी सोचे, हम सभी भी सोचें। किसी भी कर्म को ऊंचा नीचा मानने की जो मानसिकता है, उसको कैसे दूर करें। जाति का जो हेजिमनी है, जाति का जो वर्चस्व है, जाति के इस वर्चस्व को जीने वाले लोग जो अपने आप को शीर्ष पर समझते हैं, उनको विशेष तौर से पहल करनी होगी इस व्यवस्था को खत्म करने के लिए। इनके चाहे बिना यह व्यवस्था बिल्कुल नहीं बदल सकती है। इस पर मैं बिल्कुल अडिग हूं कि जब तक वो सभी मुहिम में नहीं शामिल होंगे, सरकार के इससे बदलने से कुछ नहीं होगा। हमारा आम जनमानस जो हमारा सभ्य बन चुका है, सुशिक्षित है, जो यहाँ बैठा हुआ है, उसके चाहने चीजें बदलेंगी, सिर्फ सफरर्स के आंदोलनों से नहीं बदलने वाली है। जो सोशियो इकोनॉमिक जो हमारी असमानता मिटाने की जो चुनौती है, वो एक दूसरे के लिए पूरक है। जो हमारे पॉलिटिकल कमिटमेंट है, जो राजनीतिक दलों के घोषणा पत्र में, मैनिफेस्टो में जब तक शामिल नहीं होंगे, जो जाति को उन्मूलन को लेकर के, तब तक इस देश में, और जब तक नेशनल एजेंडा नहीं बनेगा, जिस समय डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर और गांधी के समय जब नेशनल एजेंडा बना था, उस तरह का एजेंडा इस देश में जब बनेगा, तब जाकर के चीजें खत्म होंगी, तब हम उस तरफ एक कदम बढ़ा पाएंगे। भारत के प्रत्येक नागरिक का दायित्व है कि हम इस अभियान में अपनी भूमिकाओं को अदा करें और शिक्षित होने के, एजुकेट होने के अभिप्राय को साबित करें। मेरी पूरी एक एनालिसिस है, थीसिस है, जिसको मैं आपके समक्ष रखना चाहता हूं कि हम एक वर्ण वर्ग विहीन समाज बनाना चाहते हैं, उस राष्ट्र का स्वरूप देने के लिए। लेकिन अगर यह 2047 तक हम इसको नहीं अचीव कर सके, मेरा दावा है, मेरी थीसिस कहती है कि जब हम 100 वर्ष की आज़ादी मना रहे होंगे, तब SC ST OBC के लोग, जिनको आरक्षण और सहभागिता मिलने के इतने वर्ष हो चुके होंगे, अभी ओबीसी के लोग जिनको मंडल कमीशन का लाभ मिला है, उनकी भूमिकाएं अदा होना बाकी है। जब हम 2047 में पहुंचेंगे, अगर ये व्यवस्था नहीं बदली होगी तो राजनीतिक व्यवस्था निश्चित तौर पर बदलेगी और यह चीजें भी बदलेंगी। इसलिए वह बदलाव बहुत खतरनाक हो सकता है। अगर इन 20 वर्षों में हमने नहीं बदला तो राजनीतिक बदलाव बहुत खतरनाक दिशा में जाएगा। यह मैं इस तरफ सावधान कर रहा हूँ। आखिरी में पुनः ओम प्रकाश वाल्मीकि की एक कविता से अपने वक्तव्य का समापन कर रहा हूँ। उसके इमेजेस को देखें, उसके सिंबलाइजेशन को देखें, उसके प्रतीक को देखें तो बात समझ में आएगी। एक पेड़ कविता है जो संकेतों में अपनी बात सारी पूरा करती है। पेड़, तुम उसी वक्त तक पेड़ हो जब तक ये हरे पत्ते हिल रहे हैं तुम्हारी टहनियों पर। पेड़, तुम्हारा हरापन उसी वक्त तक है जब तक ये पत्ते सही सलामत हैं तुम्हारी टहनियों पर। पेड़, तुम उसी वक्त तक पेड़ हो जब तक ये पत्ते तुम्हारे साथ हैं। पत्ते झड़ते ही पेड़ नहीं, ठूंठ कहलाओगे, जीते जी मर जाओगे। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद प्रोफेसर रामचंद्र जी। मैं आपको बीच में रोका नहीं, माफ करिएगा, क्योंकि इतने भावुक दिशा में व्यक्तित्व आपका जा रहा था। मैं ये बिल्कुल आपसे सहमत हूँ कि जाति विनाश के बाद ही हम एक विकसित भारत बन सकते हैं, नहीं तो सब व्यर्थ हो जाएगा, ये सब हाथ से निकल जाएगा। Now I request Dr. Rehnamol to take the floor. She is in fact going to elaborate on what I think what Professor Ramchandra said about the challenges of caste annihilation inside and outside the community, and what can be a viable action plan to establish an egalitarian social order. Please go ahead.
Very good evening to one and all. First of all, I would like to thank Suhas for inviting me to be a part of this program. It's quite a pleasure to be one of the panelists, and also with those persons who I've been looking up to with great respect and admiration. It's a great pleasure to be here. As far as my topic is concerned, I thought of locating annihilation of caste within the prevailing socio-economic political conditions. And also, I would be highlighting some of the major challenges in realizing this idea of annihilation of caste within and outside the communities. I'm sure that many of you have already read Annihilation of Caste. So I would be looking at some of the major points with which Ambedkar has talked about, some of the major themes, and I would also be looking at the continuum of those themes in contemporary India. As Sumeet Mhaskar talked about the political reforms and the social reforms, that is one of the major highlights that Ambedkar widely discussed about in that particular book, where he says that social reform must precede the political reforms. And he says that unless and until there is no social reformation, your political or economic reforms is not going to be successful. And when he talks about the social reform, he has highlighted, especially during colonial India, how international Congress had especially two wings. One is political activism, and on the other side, they also had a social wing called National Conference. And he also says that how eventually the idea and the agenda of social reform has been overpowered by what we see as the political activism at that point of time. And he also been very critical about the fact that even at that point of time, how the National Conference social reform was completely confined only to abolition of sati, or abolition of widowhood, or abolition of child marriage. And he says that even the most erudite persons in social conference did not think about the necessity of annihilating caste or abolishing caste. And that's what exactly he says, that the limitation of the social reform at that point of time was that they have never taken up the agenda of abolition of caste in any ways. And that is one thing that he emphasized upon. And in today's time, if we critically understand the same hypothesis today, and social reform has completely been somehow somewhere been invisibilized. And of course, when we talk about the social reforms, we always look at the oppressed caste, because that's where the problem lies. And that's what exactly we also have to think about the resolution of the problem. But unfortunately, if you look at those communities, somehow, somewhere, they've been consolidating the caste identities which were supposed to be annihilated. Another important thing is that Ambedkar also says that it's quite pity that people still think that caste has to be celebrated. And he says that caste identities were taken as a part of their social life and existence. And this particular understanding of how caste has been normalized or how caste identity is being celebrated, I think this particular issue is it's not just about the oppressed caste, and that is within the communities also. That's quite provocative to see that how caste identity is being celebrated even among the oppressed caste. And for instance, if you look at the intermediary caste, because when we think about this particular proposition that caste identity is not being, it has not been seen something that has to be annihilated even among the oppressed section. One instance I would say is that the incidents, the particular intermediary caste that we have to look at it more structurally. Because when we talk about the caste system, it's not just about the binaries of oppressed caste and the oppressor caste, it's also about a system and a structure. And a system and a structure where the Brahminical morality has been percolated to other caste identities too. If we look at the intermediary caste, for example, that's what exactly where the social reforms and political reforms also come into a significance. For example, in today's time, when we look at the political mobilization, it has not been preceded by the social reform. I think with an exception of Bahujan Samajwadi Party in UP, where you could see Kanchiram had a wide social campaign just before the establishment of BSP as a political party, but that again been confined to just few states, and that's what where we can see somehow somewhere Ambedkar's idea of the social reform must precede the political reform, could be seen. But after onwards, and if you see again, there is a political formation of, for example, Bhim Army and Azad Samaj Party. We could, especially at the beginning, we could see a reflection of this idea of, how the social reform was preceded by the political reform within that particular organization. But again, Bhim Army also could not, take and go ahead further with, a kind of a complete social churning. And before, the social transformation happened, they just established a political party, and somehow, somewhere, the vision has also been lost. If you really critically understand, again, that is also subject to contestations. And another thing is that, especially when you see the political mobilization, it has, even that political mobilization also been confined to political representation and reservation. That also I find quite problematic to think about, because whether it's Mandal Commission, they have been talking about the political representation and reservation, but beyond that, is there any vision of annihilation of caste? For example, some of the intermediary caste in North India, for example, Yadav, you could see mobilization, political mobilization from their side for reservation and representation, but do they really think about annihilating the identity of Yadav? For example, Sir has talked about the caste surnames. if the caste names are not just among the oppressed caste, it's there among the oppressor caste also, whether they are ready for annihilating those caste identities. Because we could see, especially we have talked about the atrocities case here, and this is also one of the fact that which we, in that particular political calculation of Bahujan identity, we tend to hesitate to state a fact that most of the atrocities also been committed by intermediary caste. That's quite something that is maybe the elephant in the room, that, like how we address those problems where the intermediary caste, how those structures actually work. And I think I'll also come to another very contested area where it is subclassification. And I'm sure that many of, at least some of the people here must be supporting the idea of subclassification. Again, I would propose that subclassification as an idea is again very parochial in terms of looking at the representation and reservation. It is nothing to do with the annihilation of caste, because when you talk about subclassification, we are actually celebrating the Hindu imposed identities. We can see across many states, for example, in down to south, you have Palaya, Paraya, Mala, Matika. You have in north Jatov and the Pasi. So you can see a lot of caste contestations even among those communities. So I would say that classification as an idea is not in tandem with the idea of annihilation of caste. That has also to be somehow, somewhere, we have to critically understand that particular thing, because annihilation of caste is not just about the political representation or reservation. It's something that beyond what we think about reservation. And another important thing, of course, and they have already talked about, Sukumar has talked about the kind of atrocities that we see. Even when you read Annihilation of Caste, you can see n number of cases of atrocities and violence that Ambedkar has mentioned. And after 8-9 decades, we face the same, we witness the same kind of a violence in one form or the other. And one of the major point that I would like to add here is that the concept of political impunity, because that is something that we couldn't see maybe in Annihilation of Caste, but today we can see the kind of political environment with which we fight against caste violence. We don't get adequate political support, and even the perpetrators also commit these crimes with a sense of impunity. That has also to be questioned. And as I said, again, very importantly, the most important point I find, especially when you read Annihilation of Caste, is the question of moral erosion and degeneration that Ambedkar highlights. And it's quite appealing, especially when you talk about annihilation of caste. I think this is something that we have to really emphasize upon, the fact that how the caste identity is actually a reflection of the moral degeneration of a society, the values that has been eroded within the societal structure. And a few more points here I would like to add here is that caste annihilation, again, when Ambedkar has approached this particular idea of caste annihilation, he also tries to give a very universal appeal to this particular project. Many of us may think that it's a utopian idea, but the way with which he tries to universalize this particular this project. It's not just for the welfare of those people who are the victims of the caste, but it is also for the nation as a whole. And where he says that caste has corrupted the public ethics and destroyed the public spirit. Again, this is not just about confined to communities. It's more about the public spirit and ethics with which a nation has to be conducted. And then he connects it with the democracy. Again, democracy is not something that meant for only the a few section of people. It is a universal idea as a nation. And he says that democracy requires fraternity, equality, liberty. And then he says that caste has completely destroyed that. Again, he brings in this larger project of democracy, where he says that each and every citizen of this country is responsible for the project of annihilation of caste, because that is the one thing that actually obstructs and hampers the democratic principles and values of equality, justice, and fraternity. Again, a very much universalized idea there. And then again, he connects it with the nation and caste. Ramchandra sir has already highlighted that, his idea of nationalism is something that, that builds upon of the fact that how we can bring in the idea of Maitri. And then he says that you cannot build a nation based on caste. You cannot build a social order based on caste. Anything that's been built on caste is going to collapse. I think that's what exactly we can also contest the existing prevailing dominant understanding of nationalism, that of invoking the particular identity. And then that's where exactly we can also form not only a political opposition but also a social alliance in terms of redefining the nation, which has somehow, somewhere, the existing dominant understanding of nation has been very exclusionary, and that's what exactly where we can reinterpret the idea of nation based on Ambedkar's, propositions. And lastly, I would also say that, it's the terms, especially the concept of reason, rationality, and scientific temper, with which he says that, how we can actually think about this project of annihilation. And he says that, especially the caste has been defended based on the eugenics. And then he says that, even that particular eugenic, that, of course, we could see that in the Western framework where it has been used to, exclude certain race, especially in US, if you look at, that's what exactly the eugenics being used to exclude a particular race. And that has been completely applied here in India also, where, genetically, the superior, again, there's no reason, rationality, and scientific temper with which we can actually justify it. And then he says, and that's what exactly we have also one provision in constitution where, scientific temper and, the scientific inquiry has to be promoted. And that is something that we can, despite the fact that whichever the caste identity that we belong to, the idea of nation, the idea of reason, rationality, scientific temper can be promoted. And lastly, I would also like to, highlight one of the major concept that Ambedkar has put forward is constitutional morality. And he completely contradicts this idea of, I think Sukumar sir has been very vocal about constitutional morality, because I have been hearing him talking about constitutional morality, and he says that, the caste is based on certain social morals and social standards, where you unleashing violence against your fellow being would be okay or morally right as per the social standards, because that's what where the caste system has been built on. And in contradicting that particular social morality, he proposes this idea of constitutional morality, where he says that a morality that's been built upon the constitutional values of liberty, equality, and justice, where you look at your own fellow being based on certain egalitarian ideals. And that's what exactly the transformation of an individual also starts with. That, when he talks about nation, when he talks about constitution, what he says is that you as an individual, you as a citizen of this country, how you're gonna treat your own fellow being. And that actually comes from this idea of constitution, that, that value system that has to be cultivated. Again, he says that in the Constituent Assembly also, he says that constitutional morality is not a natural sentiment. It has to be cultivated. And that's what where exactly, the idea also lies in. And it's quite unfortunate also that we have certain opposition even against the idea of constitutional morality. For example, very recently, the Attorney General of India said that, no, constitutional morality is not something that has to be discussed about. Again, that comes from, the social location, that comes from the privileges of, being, an oppressed caste. And that's what exactly, again, we have to emphasize upon that, how to cultivate the constitutional morality, and how we can bring in this constitutional values. And that, Ramchandra sir has also, he has given a very comprehensive list of, what is the way out. But as far as, every time I have, especially when I have a interaction with my students in the class, I always see that this is quite, again, this is just in my thinking process, where, how you actually transform, the students or the people who belong to the oppressed caste, who rarely understand what you're subjective experiences are. They're quite, lack of empathy and sympathy that you see every day. I think one of the means by which I try to maybe bring in a little bit of a change in them is that you treat your other people based on the individual traits, like whether the particular individual is good or bad, instead of carrying this moral baggage of the social location and the religious identity. Apart from Buddhism, I would say that maybe that liberal understanding of looking at an individual as an individual based on their characteristics and qualities. Of course, again, this can also be contested that how an individual can be abstracted from the moral structure. But I would conclude by saying is that annihilation of caste is something very multi-pronged approach, where we will have to bring in all the stakeholders, and most importantly, we are looking towards the oppressed caste people, because the number of people who are talking against caste is it's quite minimal. And in that way, whether it's civil society organization, whether it's academicians, there should be a kind of a collective understanding, both from from both sides, so that we can think towards an egalitarian social order where every individual of this country can live a life with dignity and self-respect. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now we come to Disha. She's been taking up the case of Rohit Vemula in the Supreme Court. You see, the suicide of Rohit Vemula, exposed by attempts to co-opt Ambedkar as a Hindu reformer, cannot succeed due to inherent ideological contradictions. The challenge posed by the Ambedkar Students Association at the Hyderabad Central University to the Brahminical hegemony of Hindutva by the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad is in the very logic of the Dalit political vision. Over to you.
Yeah. Hi. Sorry. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I am not going to take a lot of time. I can see, firstly, thank you everyone for being so patient, all the listeners over here. It's been a while. I'm so grateful for the invitation and to be alongside such great people whose work I look up to in all kinds of fields, in history and sociology. But today I think I would like to focus on the Constitution. And Rehna, you kind of borrowed, or you kind of spoke about what I was already going to speak, so which is about constitutional morality, but now I'm going to change my track. I was very recently, I was reading about Anand Teltumbde's work. He's written this book called Dalits and the Indian Constitution. And why I'm talking about the Constitution is because let me start with this premise that a lot of us think that Constitution on its own can accelerate the project of annihilation of caste. And there is some reality to it, and I think some sort of delusion to it as well. But before I get into that, I will just like to start with what Mr. Teltumbde says. So he says that the Indian Constitution, if you look at it, it has Article 17. It has this provision of abolition of caste, abolition of untouchability, sorry, right? And the Constitution says that untouchability will be abolished. But according to him, the Indian Constitution does not make the same declaration about caste, right? So it doesn't say in those many words that caste system will be abolished, right? He's basically trying, he enters this conversation through a criticism of the Ambedkarite movement, which according to him reveres the Constitution, right? And to him that reverence is, the way I read it, is this sort of naive, idealistic reverence of the Constitution. Now, he critiques that sort of idealistic reverence of the Constitution by saying that basically the Indian Constitution as a document, though he doesn't say it in those many words, but it is a bourgeoisie sort of document, right? Where he is implying that exactly what your privileged caste Constituent Assembly members wanted, which is that abolish untouchability. A lot of us have spoken about how a lot of privileged caste reformers of the time were talking about abolition of untouchability, but were not really interested in addressing caste and challenging caste on its own, right? So he says that that sort of vision has transformed into the constitution, and that sort of vision can be situated and can be seen in the constitution, right? He therefore is sort of critiquing the constitution as a document, that the constitution is really not going to abolish or annihilate caste. And I would like to maybe push back a little against that argument, because I would like to, because Tel Tumde is trying to make a structural argument. He looks at, or a Marxist argument, he looks at Ambedkarites as these nice identitarian politics people who are basically only focusing on psyche, on mentality, who don't really look at structures. But I would say that Ambedkar was the ultimate structural scholar that we've had, right? And Ambedkarite politics is about structural politics. So the mere declaration of abolition of caste or annihilation of caste, even though you don't see it in the constitution in those many words, but you see all its pathways in the constitution document. And what are these pathways? These pathways are in the form of course, Article 17 itself, which is the symptom of the caste system, the ultimate symptom of the caste system, which is untouchability. But then there is Article 14, there is Article 15, which is about non-discrimination on the basis of caste. More importantly is Article 15.2, which is giving access to public spaces, right? Non-discrimination in that sense, which is also not about just the discrimination that is imposed by the state, but which is horizontal discrimination, that you discriminate against me, that sort of discrimination, that is entrenched in the constitutional document. This is a pathway that I'm talking about, right? Article 15.3, which is about special provisions for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. 15.4, which is special provisions for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Reservation in education, reservation in services, political reservations in the form of Article 330, 332, Article 340, which a lot of people really miss, but we've not heard of this article, or we don't know much about this article, but this was about instituting a commission by the president to look into the conditions of backward classes, right? This is the reason why we have the Mandal Commission. So this is all entrenched in the constitutional document. These pathways are already there, right? So for someone to say that the constitution is not a document of annihilating caste or abolition of caste, to me, is not looking at the constitution deeply. Secondly, while making that structural argument that, well, I don't think that the constitution is annihilating caste or abolishing caste, the whole idea is that constitution on its own is this sort of static document, right? And it has to be this perfect document. And that is not what Dr. Ambedkar had envisioned at all. So let me tell you about this document called States and Minorities. Some of you must have heard about it. Dr. Babasaheb Bhimrao in 1947 doesn't really trust the constitution making process. So the Constituent Assembly is there. And there is already this advisory committee that has been set up. Then from the advisory committee, they are supposed to come up with a draft. And then that draft goes to the Constituent Assembly. It is discussed. And of course, then the constitution is brought into force. But at the very beginning in 1947, at the beginning of that process, Dr. Ambedkar submits a draft called the States and Minorities, which is almost like a treatise or a blueprint of the pathway that we need to, the path that we need to tread to realize the constitutional vision. And to me, that is really the crux of this vision of annihilation of caste. So Dr. Ambedkar's whole idea, and why I call him the ultimate structuralist, is that he has consistently, and Rehna spoke about it, and Sumeet spoke about it, Sukumar sir also spoke about it, that he has consistently held that formal democracy or political democracy, we will have that. We have a constitution. That constitution is essentially a political document. Any constitution of any country is a political document. We will have it. We will have year after year. We will have every 5 years. We will have these elections, and we will have this illusion of formal democracy and political democracy. but he was more insistent on the economic and social democracy. And he said that that economic and social democracy and those structures and pathways will have to be built within the constitution. You can't expect that one fine day, the governing class will wake up, or that governing class will, with its goodness, give you this democracy. That is not going to happen. And therefore, we need to have these adequate safeguards in the form of economic and social democracy. And then he, in states and minorities, he gives those pathways. Essentially, I think a major focus in states and minorities is on economic restructuring. I think we've a little bit of us, a part of us, many of us have actually lost that sight of economic restructuring that Dr. Ambedkar had provided. And so when he submits that socio-economic democracy document, that is states and minorities, before a committee that is essentially going to decide the political future of this country, which is through the constitution, he is essentially being a structuralist, and he's saying that we cannot achieve that political democracy. We cannot annihilate caste in that sense. And I think the annihilation of caste project and democratic project are interlinked. One can't see them as different. Then that cannot happen without social and economic democracy. And then he was vigilant enough, and he was, I would say, foresighted enough to actually see that these pathways, unlike if you look at other constitutions, you look at the US Constitution, you look at the South African Constitution, all the other democratic constitutions, you don't see that they are such lengthy documents, right? All these sort of economic, social pathways of emancipation are not within the constitutional text. And there is a reason why Dr. Ambedkar ensured that these pathways are entrenched in the constitutional text. The other way he looked at it is that these institutions, whether it is the judiciary, whether it is the executive, whether it is your legislature, these are all your democratic institutions. He is talking about mediating power by accessing these institutions, right? So when he talks about reservation, he says that the depressed classes need a look in to the administration where power resides, right? Where the power center is. So it is also about these pathways through reservations, through political representation, that Dr. Ambedkar is talking about access to these places, right? And what we see in contemporary times is how this access to these pathways that the Constitution has provided us, how that access, and there is this pushback against that access. Let's take, for example, just reservations, right? Like consistently, time and again, you will see that there is a lot of undermining of the reservation policy, the not found suitable tag that people get in faculty positions, in recruitments. There is a lot of pushback against it by not filling up reservations in educational institutions. There is a lot of pushback from the judiciary in diluting the reservation policy through premier and through other sorts of barriers that the judiciary has created. So these pushbacks, whenever these pathways are provided by the Constitution, they are not going to work on their own. Let us understand that. Even Dr. Ambedkar didn't think that they are going to work on their own and they are sufficient on their own. So thinking of the Constitution as this final static document that will annihilate caste in itself is a problem. We will have to understand that it gave us the pathways. It was Dr. Ambedkar and his vision that we have these pathways. It is through these pathways that we will have to permeate the system to mediate power and power structures. And there is going to be a backlash. Wherever there is going to be a reform, there is going to be a pathway, there is going to be retrenchment. There is going to be undermining and undercutting of those pathways, right? So being vigilant about entering these spaces, being vigilant about how these pathways are restricted is also very important. Pushing back against the ways and manners and practices by which these pathways are blocked for us. These power institutions, let's think about this. Let's think about how do we enter the judiciary, right? How is power distributed in the judiciary? Let's think about how the power is distributed, of course, in the executive, how power is distributed in the legislature, how power is distributed in artistic fields. Let's discuss about how power is distributed in academic fields. Let's discuss about how power is distributed economically. And unless we have these discussions, I don't think, even though the Constitution, I think it's one of the best documents, and I would say it's not just a political document, it's essentially a structural document that recognizes socio-economic injustices and addresses it and provides remedies to address it. Despite that, I would say that if we don't have a civil society, like everyone has said, that is vigilant enough. If we don't have the governing class that goes with this notion and this idea of constitutional morality, and that actually cultivates that idea of constitutional morality as against caste morality or public morality that is already existing. And unless and until social movements are not vibrant and sustained, right? I would really like to emphasize the fact that we need to revive the Ambedkarite movement in every which way possible. And youngsters like us and everyone, I think, should come together to revive that. But without sustained social movements, all of these pathways are going to be blocked for us. And it is for us through these social movements to permeate in these pathways and to utilize and access these pathways. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a critical issue which you have raised about social movements taking over. That has to, come from within. It has to come very dynamically. Now we go on to the last speaker, Professor Alone, who's been right through with us in 2010, in these series. And he is going to now, I think, move on from the structural problem to the cultural problem, So you go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Suhas, for initiating this. And it's been a pleasure to be part of this journey since 2010, despite many hurdles and everything we have been sailing through. Today, indeed, I mean, the 1st May is a May Day. We celebrate as a World Labor Day. Not only that, we also celebrate as a Maharashtra Day, as a part of formation of the state. And it so happens that today is also Buddha Purnima, Buddha Jayanti. And I extend my warm greetings on the occasion of Buddha Jayanti. A person which is produced by this nation who influenced the world and gave the logic of Pratyuta Samutpad, that is theory of dependent origination or interdependent origination, to explain the phenomenon. And this power is completely lost today, and we claim that we are Vishwaguru. These are the claims that we are Vishwaguru. Then there is another claim that we are going towards Vikasit Bharat, which my earlier speakers has elaborated upon. But at the same time, we also need to understand the fact that without cultivation of mind, we cannot achieve this thing. No matter whether you give a person 2,000 rupees a month or 10,000 rupees a month, or maybe provide a bus ticket or a rail ticket, or for that matter, flight ticket, or even for that matter, the states are engaged in giving the money for their religious pilgrimage. So no matter what you do, but what matters is a consciousness. And what is a consciousness India has produced so far? I see it very differently. We have the consciousness largely in India. It is the consciousness of senselessness. It is this idea of consciousness of senselessness that rules each and every citizen of the Republic of Government of India. I won't exclude anyone. I would rather prefer to include everyone. The minuscule minority cannot become a voice when it comes to the righteous consciousness. But a minuscule minority which rules this nation and their ideological formulations become a major task, and becoming a controlling majority, which is also a claim. And it is this consciousness which becomes a hindrance to become a developed nation or developing nation, you may say that we are this trillion economy and that trillion economy. These are the claims. And then how, say, for example, the colonial India, the caste was seen only as a problem of untouchability. Why? Because the untouchables were against the oppression. And that is the reason caste was only conceptualized as a part of untouchability, whether it is Gandhi, whether it is nationalists. All those nationalists which Sukumar has mentioned, they have all anti-women in their life. You see their work, you see the statements they have made. They are all anti-women. And this is how the public sphere is governed in India. And this public sphere is largely supported, very meticulously planted, and every time there is an ideological support by the Vedantic logic. Why? The Vedantics have not produced the structure of equality. Neither they produce equalities nor they produce structures of equality. And the nation is always said outside India as a great spiritual nation. What kind of a spirituality, we don't know. I have failed to understand. I will be happy to get educated by the Vedantics, their spirituality. Why their spirituality does not empower themselves to speak against the inequalities, to stand for justice, to stand for the betterment of the life. People come for congregation, but the moment they go out of those satsang, हम भी तो जाट है, हम तो गुज्जर है, हम तो बामन है, हम तो ये है, हम तो सारस्वत है, all kinds of things. So where is your spirituality? You have to question that. And the consciousness of senselessness all the time river tali bajao, thali bajao. It is this phenomenon which is not really related exclusively with the uneducated section, but the educated section and the well-off section. We have photographic and videographic evidences during corona where you have a large-scale celebration of Tali Bajao, Thali Bajao. I mean, imagine the people banging talis and thalis, taking out their hands out of balconies of the houses which cost 2 crore, 3 crore, 5 crore villas and everything. You have these evidences. And we celebrate that Tali Bajao, Thali Bajao as a part of great cultural celebration, and we take it as a path to developing nation, or we are going to have, I don't know what kind of a developing nation we have. I'm sorry to say that. And then comes this logic of Savarnatva. This logic of Savarnatva is a big hindrance, not only to annihilate caste or oppose caste, but also to the entire development of the people. Whether it is spiritual, whether it is material, whether it is technological, whether it is psychological. You see, Dr. Ambedkar made it very clearly in his text called Symbols of Hinduism that caste is a perversion of Varna. And therefore, I say that caste is a psychotic perversion. And what Indians are living in is the psychotic perversion all the time. Let us accept the fact that we are a perverted society. I'm saying not me, but I'm saying collectively that we are a perverted society. The Constitution does not allow you, or rather empower you to come out of this perversion, but we simply do reverse. We constantly pervert our Constitution. This is how the mind consciousness functions. And when people say that, oh, what is this morality? This constitutional morality, and then there is a political morality. We constantly say that, oh, you need to have political morality. Do we ever question the origin of political morality or the basis of political morality? The political morality comes from your political ideology. It does not come through Constitution. The constitutional morality is completely different, that completely subverts your political morality and makes you a neutral person to act and make decisions accordingly. And therefore, it also becomes the responsibility of the leaders of this nation, whether it is this political party or that political party, to say that you don't follow caste, annihilate caste, do this, do that. But we don't do that. They don't say that. Why? Because they are all part of the followers of the Vedanta. The Vedantic logic will never impart. You see, there are the Savarna people are there. There is a see the what Immense Rivan says that it is Sanskritization. I totally disagree with that. There is nothing called Sanskritization. It is the Savarnatva that everyone wants to become Savarna. And how you become Savarna in India? By butchering Dalits, by butchering scheduled caste, by defaming women all the time in the public sphere, by lynching people, you achieve that Savarna. So it is this cultural psychosis, it is this perversion, cultural perversion, which constantly is being followed and protected by the state. And if these perversions are protected by the state, I don't think 2047 is a teddy kheer or the dur ki baat. We can't achieve. We can't really do those kind of things. Another important thing is, this whole idea of samarasta, or even for that matter, the Disha talks about judiciary. I mean, judiciary has failed us, completely failed us. There are very few people with whom we constantly bang. We have a lot of reverence for judiciary. We always think that we will get justice. But if the justice is denied to the citizens of the Republic of Government of India, then the citizens of the Republic of Government of India cannot really think of Vikasit Bharat, neither they can become part of the Vikasit Bharat. They will remain part of the Bahishkrut Bharat. You have to understand that logic. And in order to make Bharat as an enlightened Bharat, which Dr. Ambedkar had conceptualized, you have to shade your consciousness of senselessness. And this consciousness of senselessness is being protected by the followers of the many people. And Savarna is a very important category. It cuts across the caste. Let me tell you, a lot of people have anxiety to become Savarna. And it is this syndrome. And you have to understand that it is a hierarchy. And within the hierarchy, you see, even if the OBC, who are the main perpetrator of the violence, to be very frank, it is the day जिस दिन इस देश का ओबीसी सुधरेगा उस दिन देश बदल जाएगा. Simple. I am not banking on Brahmins or the caste Hindus. This is the truth of this nation. They have to change. They have to realize. They have to see that it is the nation of collectivity, multicity, multiculturalism, ethnicity. And in order to achieve that, you have only one way. And that one way is that of karuna, compassion. Ambedkar made it very clear. For him, fraternity is not about bandhutva, mere bandhutva, brotherhood. He says fraternity is karuna. And whose karuna it is? It is Buddha's karuna. That you have to inculcate mind. You have to inculcate the culture of mind. It is a cultivation of mind. And the caste is a problem of mind. It's a problem of consciousness. It's a problem which is deeply culturally rooted. And the idea of sacred and divine will always lead to the Savarnatva. It will never discard the logic of Savarnatva. The person who wishes to become Sanskritized is basically a Brahmanization process. But he does not become Brahmin. You see, the only thing you can become is Kshatriya. बस वहीं तक के जा सकते हो आप. And that is why I call it as Savarnatva. And unless until you have that anxiety to become Savarnatva exists in India, that problem of caste and its psychotic perversion will persist all the time. There is no sense of realization. There is no introspection. Introspection is a serious category. And neither the caste Hindus, nor the Savarnas, nor the people who are engaged in the process of Savarnatva realize that they are basically practicing perversions and inscribing perversion and creating inhibitions and the hindrances. And at the end, I would say that this logic of Daivavad, I'm using certain terms which are very, very dear to me because we come from the Indian tradition. So this logic of Daivavad or Daivatva, divine and sacred, this logic of divine and sacred, you see, there are two kinds of people. The Savarnas I divide into two categories, not Savarna, but the Savarnatva I divide into two categories. One is the one who are karmat in their practice, and they're part of certain political parties in India. And second category is they believe in their logic of sacred and divine, but wishes to be part of the constitutional democracy. And those people are very few. They also constitute civil society. But the civil society constantly nurture within themselves this syndrome of Savarnatva. And unless until you dismantle this Savarnatva syndrome, I don't think we can become a better nation, good nation, healthy nation, a nation which we can proud of. Today, we need to have the institutions where everyone takes pride. And the only institution in this country is Indian Railway, where everyone takes pride. सब लोग चलते हैं, हर एक को लगता है ये हमारी भारतीय रेल है, बाकी किसी को लगता नहीं कि वो हमारा जो इंटरनेशनल टर्मिनल T1, T2, T3 ये हमारा भारतीय है. ये फैक्ट. These are the experiences of people. It is not just because you are coming from certain caste, therefore you have this experience. No, it cuts across the caste. And therefore, we need to create the structures of democracy, democratic equalities. Our universities, which aspire to be democratic, but they are the most rotten institutions. I come from the university and I tell you, the academics in India is a rotten lot. It operates like a syndicate. अरे भाई वो हमारा जो underworld syndicate has some ethics and morality. We will not touch your girl, we will not kill your wife and family and all this. The academic, it's a syndicate which has no morality at all. Absolutely no morality. And that is the reason we don't produce any thinker in this country who cannot challenge, neither they can challenge Foucault, nor they challenge Derrida, nor they challenge this whole entire gang of post-colonialists. They are the biggest syndicate of this world. And they are ruling in Europe and America. And we see, either you become a bootlicker or you become some other liquor. These are the only two options you have. And how you navigate between these two, it is all the psychotic perversion. And these so-called claim intellectuals have not been able to dismantle their own presuppositions. These claim intellectuals who claim that we are a part of civil society, very liberated society. What kind of a liberty, what kind of a liberal ethos they have, and they practice through their academic discourse. It needs to be challenged. And this challenge can only come when we seriously think about the the logic of Pratita Samutpan, which empowers you to become a neutral, which empowers you to think differently and share your inhibition. And it is this Buddha's idea of Karuna that becomes a important bridge to achieve this development or to be claimed as Vikasit Bharat or a better nation. Thank you very much.
Now we'll open the discussion. I mean, with the time we have 20 minutes. We'll open it to the floor. Now, I just, want to ask the panel, anybody can volunteer. I mean, I think the first obstacle to a casteless society or a no caste society is the Manusmriti. Now, what anybody who chooses, will you, Professor?
As a person who is deeply engaged with the textual tradition, yes, indeed, you have to see. These days, this ICAS has become a some kind of a great thing to do in Indian academic system. I'm not against that ICAS and all those things. Yes, it should be there, but Manusmriti should be taught in the academic institutions. But at the same time, Ambedkar's critique of Manusmriti should also be taught. At the same time, the way in which Dr. Ambedkar has made interventions in producing the critique of not only the Vedantic, but the entire philosophical traditions that were prevalent in India should also be taught in the academic sphere, in not only academic sphere, the preamble, recitation of the preamble should begin right from the childhood. And then only then people will, when the children grow, then he will have that sense of relativity. And the teaching of Manusmriti should be taught. It must be there. And let we empower the children, the students, the women and everyone to discard it totally and dismantle it totally. Not only that, burn it constantly.
So, can we pick up any questions from this side? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. One observation and two questions. You referred to apartheid at the beginning and just now referred to Manusmriti. In apartheid, when you and traveled South Africa and I also traveled South Africa, I came to the conclusion that Manusmriti was entrenched in the South African politics because the whites were Brahmins, the Vaishyas were colored people, Zulus were Kshatriyas, and blacks were Shudras. The Shudras were called, blacks were called black ants. They were working in the mines, and all those graybeards and other people who were extracting gold, they used to call them black ants. That continued even today also, even after the liberation. Now, I just want to ask one question to you, that what is happening in the last 12 years in this country? Is it a liberalization? I mean, if you look at the caste, is it a perpetuation of caste? Or it is they want to liberalize the whole thing? And secondly, what will be the implications of the caste-based conscience which the government is talking about? Thank you. So we'll pick up three questions. It's Vijay Naik, a veteran journalist. Anybody else from this side? Yeah. Yeah, pick up a mic. Just give him the mic, please.
Thank you so much for this lovely insight. I was expecting something new, but it's okay. I got. So I have a series of questions, but I will finish in 1 or 2 minutes. So has intercaste marriage become the sole remaining tenet of Ambedkarism? Is Ambedkarism still relevant when everyone claims to be an Ambedkarite? Is Ambedkarism heeding in the same direction as communism has gone. Have upper caste allies diluted Ambedkarism? Has campus politics turned Ambedkarism into ideology of the elite? When everyone is Ambedkarite, is still necessary to hold on Ambedkarism. Just like how everyone now talks about the worker rights, is there a need to separately address Ambedkar? Are Dalits being used as a pawn by anti-state elements? It is necessary for Dalits to ensure justice for everyone. When no one comes forward to support Dalits, why should Dalits just focus on their own concern? सर एक ऑब्जर्वेशन है प्रोफेसर रामचंद्र सर से कि सर ने एक पॉलिटिकल कॉन्शियसनेस की बात करी है क्योंकि अम्बेडकर हैज रिजेक्टेड द पॉलिटिकल साइंस, उनका पूरा कॉन्शियसनेस रिलीजन से आया है. तो सर अगर हम सिर्फ यहाँ पे दलितों को यहाँ पे हम क्या ऐसा लग रहा है कि सर दे आर जस्ट जस्टिफाइंग टू इंडिया अलायंस वर्सेस समथिंग एल्स, कि हम इंडिया अलायंस को अम्बेडकर जस्टिफाई कर रहे हैं. ये तो अम्बेडकरिज्म नहीं है. जितना when I read Ambedkar, I got something else. But when I read post-Ambedkarite discourse, I got something else, which might be productive, but not like the Ambedkar, what Ambedkar has delivered. So this is my question. You all of you. Thank you.
I wanted to just flag the point that, Ambedkar, he gave evidences before the South Borough Committee on Franchise in 1919. So he said, see how this SIR has led to disenfranchisement of millions of people in Bengal. Okay. Now, in this context, Ambedkar wrote that right to franchise, adult franchise, is a first step, a political right, along with many other political rights, for what he called a society based on one person, one value, which in other words means a step towards annihilation of caste. So therefore, SIR is a process of disenfranchisement, and it is a huge stumbling block for a step towards annihilation of caste. All right, so in his book, I'm sorry, I disagree entirely with several of the propositions. See, Ambedkar said in his annihilation of caste, toward the end of it, India requires a religion based on liberty, equality, and fraternity. Sustenance of that religion, the source of sustenance can be located within India, not outside. And source of sustenance, he said, is Upanishads. It is there in the annihilation of caste. So therefore, to discard Vedanta, which is Upanishad, I think it's inconsistent with Ambedkar's view. So these are the few points I would flag.
Yeah, nothing much, but how one can understand the idea of Ambedkarism, where the constitutionalism becomes a significant bedrock. Okay, not necessarily, there is nothing India Alliance, something. I'm telling. Okay, we need to constantly engage on the idea of annihilation of caste, which no political party has a vision towards to that. That includes whether it is right-wing political parties or left-wing political parties or even centric political parties. All are the same. So the idea of Ambedkarism as an ideological, base to address multiple concerns, not only the first thing which we are debating today is, annihilation of caste. But beyond that, there are many things where, I call it as the politics of constitutionalism, which is a very important aspect. therefore, that is where, where I come from, when it's where, when Rehnamol was also mentioning about, the Dalit Bahujan discourse, which is very important. Even Aluni was also mentioning about that. And maybe Ambedkar might have mentioned about the Upanishadic tradition, but he has problems with what he engaged with the entire religious tradition, including Vedas. He completely engaged. It's not that, he just mentioned as that need to be looked within the Indian, He ultimately led towards to Buddhism, though he mentioned in 1920s, early 20s when he wrote Annihilation of Caste. But by 1950s, what would have been Ambedkar's position? Certainly, he never advocated any kind of Upanishadic or Vedic tradition, which he might have said that, one could be find solution in that. But over a period of time, he completely discarded the idea of Upanishadic or even Vedic tradition as a Ambedkarite scholar, where I would like to disagree with that. Thank you.
Wait, एक minute. I'll just wish to highlight certain things as a part of what Sukumar has also said. Well, as far as South's question is concerned about SIR and all the political franchises and all those things, let me also say that in the Constituent Assembly, Dr. Ambedkar was also part of the subcommittee which was on the franchise and franchisee. And there he had proposed that the franchisee be made the fundamental right, to which Sardar Patel said that let the Constituent Assembly decide, and Ambedkar said that unless until we do that, it will not become, the Constituent Assembly on its own will not decide, will not take it up. And this is a problem. If there would have been franchisee as a fundamental right, today we would not have faced this problem of all this SIR and all those things. The second thing is about the Upanishad. Sir, I totally disagree with you. I can tell you, you please read Riddle in Hinduism, what he explores about the political democracy and the possibilities of making political democracy in the Indian philosophical system, which will be very good to read and explore. So there are the explorations, and he rejects Vedanta, which is very clear. When he writes, just read his Buddhist Dhamma, it is very much clear. And the not only that, let me also submit that the people like, say, for example, all these nationalists, Gandhi, Tagore, then this Swami Vivekanand, all this Ramakrishna and all those, even this Ghosh, Arvindo Ghosh and all those, these are all the Vedantic people, and the Vedanta has in a way supported many of the strands that comes as a part of divine and sacred, which does not dismantle your own inhibitions and also the kind of a consciousness which you carry on all the time. These are the larger philosophical debates, and that's the reason Ambedkar also said that the Russian Revolution was all about the equality which bypasses liberty, and the French Revolution was all about liberty which bypasses equality, and both cannot be achieved without fraternity, and fraternity is all about the compassion, Buddha's karuna. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My name is Sushant Singh, and I'm a lawyer by profession. Extremely grateful for the insightful session. The thing we are discussing is that how do we annihilate caste, and with my lived experience, I'll just be brief. Yes, I'm coming to that, sir. That with my experience that living in London and traveling to across the US, that the caste is also traveling abroad. So it is very evident that in the students' university, that how the students are being discriminated on the basis of the caste. And then we come to the corporates. There is many Costco case, and then there's a Chandra case in the UK, that how the caste exists and the discrimination is happening. Unfortunately, in the Chicago, that the 2008, there was honor killing. Sir briefly mentioned about it, that honor killing is happening in India, but it is also happening in the US. And it's the publication in the Chicago Times that just because the boy was from the Dalit community, the daughter was pregnant and she was burnt alive with the entire family. So how do we challenge this kind of a thing that the entire discussion is bent on, that how do we annihilate caste on this Upanishad and everything, so and so. Truly grateful for that. But we also need to think about that when the privileged class or the haves of the Dalit community or the other community, they are traveling abroad, then how do we annihilate in the cross borders? Because unfortunately, they do not have the atrocities acts as well. And they are struggling to find out that how to recognize the caste as a discriminatory ground in comparison to, or the similar to the crisis. Thank you. Yeah.
Suhas, nobody's answered about this caste-based, census which is being talked about by the Home Ministry. And so I would like to know the implications of that, because all experts are sitting here. What do they think about it?
There is a current situation takes place in UP where 10,000 Dalits converts into Brahmins. So it can be an idea of annihilation of caste, or it is something else.
I have a question to Aluni sir, that in bid to have a wishful thinking to annihilate caste, to what extent it's possible, to what extent it is good to expect from all those who are enjoying the fruit of castified society to be part of this move, even despite being a minority in number. Can they, do you really think that can they contribute in the process of annihilation of caste in a realistic manner? And I have one observation to make, that many of us did talk about Samarasta in a kind of passing reference, but probably we need to develop a relatively greater critique in depth, that how the whole idea of Samarasta is being fraudulently produced before us and talked in terms of harmony alone. The question should be that whose cost do you want to maintain that kind of Samarasta? And are you going to leave out anything for that purpose? And it is nothing more than just establishment and maintenance of status quo position in their term of Samarasta, which I think we should certainly
okay.
About that. Yeah.
Sir, my proposal is about casteless society or religious society or classless society. Is not possible. Caste is like our skin. We cannot live without skin. We can't live without caste also.
I think you have dialed the wrong number.
No, let me complete. The way we have a hierarchy in the upper caste is same in the hierarchy in the SC, ST also. Why they are not having the same similarity with them? Why they are having discrimination in lower caste also? Like we have two main castes like what's called Chamar and Bhangi. They don't have the same respect for each other. They also discriminate from each other. Second thing, the way the upper caste people want to have a standard job, they are not allowed to have it.
Anyway, okay, we'll pick it up.
I also have a question. So my name is Shaheen, and my question is, like, most of us know that the idea of a Hindu Rashtra did not emerge all of a sudden, but has been slowly cultivated since the time of independence through a conscious use of visual culture, arts and aesthetics, shaping public imagination over decades, even through figures associated with the nation like Nehru, Gandhi, Tagore, and Sarabhai, and many others. So, and also Professor Sukumar just mentioned that Babasaheb himself left Hinduism and embraced Buddhism. Professor Aluri just talked about Buddha's way of Maitre, Karuna, and Pratyut Samutpad. So my question is that what are the challenges or problem, if there is problem at all, when Dalits or Muslims seek a consciously assert their own culture, aesthetics, and visual presence to resist caste oppression and majoritarian dominance? If culture has always been a side of power, why is counter assertion treated as a threat rather than a necessary act of resistance? And can annihilation of caste possible without cultural discourse or intervention? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's going to be a very small one. Yeah. And in fact, it's going to be in addition to what the young advocate said or asked, and to which Professor Sukumar also referred to, was that the caste system migrates with the Indians wherever they go, which I'm sure most of us have experienced outside this country. But before that, I would like to mention that, of course, civil society is one space through which we can attempt to annihilate caste. And here, we are also part of the social movement, because social movement is a subset of civil society, as I say theoretically, and we, the organizers and plus the organization here, is part of the social movement. Now, what are those structures? We talked about these structures here in this country, and disabling structures we talked about. Why the caste has not been? We have not been able to make a dent on the caste system. As we migrate outside, there also the social movements react to it. For example, the UK. I have some understanding of the UK system, having lived there for a decade or more. There were quite a few social movements. I knew the people running those social, or rather organizing those are voluntary organizations.
So we're talking about migration and the caste.
Migration, and the bill was pushed in the British Parliament.
Yeah.
But at the last minute, it was stopped and rejected. So what are those structures there which led to?
Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. The last one. Last one. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Mayur. So everyone it has discussed on the representation and reservation politics, policy, and then challenges. So I want to ask this question here. There was a time when in 1905 when the Shahu implemented reservation policy, then extended non-Brahmin movement by Madras or Mysore or Bombay Presidency, and then one of the biggest outcome of that movement, or the then lead by Babasaheb as a reservation. And that was a time when the left, center, and right was denying the representation in every sphere, although political or the services or education. But today, how do we see when the left, right, center are ready to give representation, but with the body, not the brain? Second, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, pick up the mic. So press the key.
Yeah, I just have an observation that when we are talking of this mindlessness, or when we are talking of this senselessness or this pervertness, I would say that to understand, especially the structures of annihilation, I would say that the intersectionality between gender and caste is something that I could observe that was not talked about much here. But I think it's the women which actually are the holders of, because they are the ones without which, when you talk of the senselessness or that religious eulogization of those rules, you see that it's only women, with which you actually maintain that purity of caste. It's women who are actually given that responsibility of holding that thali, taking care of the diya, taking care of that izzat. So you have to understand that unless we don't see that intersectionality of caste and gender, I don't think so we can actually understand the basic structures of annihilation of caste. That's just an observation. Thank you.
Just one second. Would you like to pick up that gender thing?
To pick up the caste census.
Would you like to pick up?
Can I? Gender thing you can pick up. The caste census, sir, See, for so many years that, I mean, people were looking for opportunities, and, that could be one of the way one can see. But let the anti-caste law comes, the caste census becomes irrelevant. If every streams comes together and say that, look, from tomorrow onwards, anything which is based on caste identity should not be recognized. And there should be some other alternative mechanism that can be developed, and the caste census becomes irrelevant. That is one thing. Second thing is that, as our last, the one who was before was asking about. See, it's not that it is impossible to annihilate caste. Like, we have seen in South Africa, apartheid. Do we have all the political ideologues like left, right, and center, including all three ideologues, coming together collectively, proposing that tomorrow there will be a law that will completely take over on the idea of caste, that will annihilate? Let us say that annihilation of caste, I think over a period of time, it should be addressed. It can be addressed. You need to have the political will, social will. Therefore, that's what I proposed: radical empathy. And these are the two things which is the need of the hour.
Is Sumeet there? Sumeet, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I am.
Comment you would like to make on any of
Just one or two quick comments. One is about particularly, Ambedkar is now fashionable, and for the past decade at least, and since Rohit Vemula, I must say. So to the questions that were raised, everybody is not necessarily an Ambedkarite. Maybe some of them, feel like, claiming an Ambedkarite. But in practice, you don't see necessarily them talking about the caste practices that prevail across various states ruled by different political parties. So caste is not necessarily a problem of one political party. And Ambedkarite movement has not necessarily been diluted by the presence of upper caste. You need that strong presence, and even at the very beginning of the organized Dalit politics, Ambedkar had his upper caste associates as well. And therefore, if that had not diluted, I don't see a reason why they should be diluted now. The questions are more or less, that comes up constantly, which is about the hierarchy within Dalits. I think these kind of questions tend to negate the fact that caste is a graded hierarchy. There is also hierarchy within the Brahmins. There is hierarchy within the OBCs, within the Kshatriyas. So it's a graded hierarchy. But the bottom line is that as far as all Dalits are concerned, they all face discrimination. There is no doubt about it. They may be treating differently to each other, but as far as the structure of caste is concerned, they are absolutely excluded. And everybody faces more or less discrimination and exclusion. In the degree may vary here and there. And I think that is one of the points I wanted to raise. And the last point is, which I'm sure I want other speakers to also talk, is that caste is not one particular kind of a building that needs to be just demolished and the problem is going to be over. Caste is entrenched very much into the minds of the people, and it has very much become part of various institutions. And unless and until, of course, we need modern laws to tackle these problems, but we also need to change the mindset of people who are implementing those laws, whether it's police machinery or the judges, and as well as restraining the public from, making such kind of loose statements about the supporting the caste kind of order. So unless there is a transformation on various fronts, we cannot tackle the problem of caste. So caste is not just one thing that you just break and it will go away. Caste take its avatar in different forms. It has taken avatar abroad, and it will take abroad everywhere. Yeah.
Thank you. Now you have a point on the gender.
So where you talk about the intersectionality of caste and gender, it's largely known as Brahmanical patriarchy. We have actually missed out on that because we largely focused on annihilation of caste, but Ambedkar has largely discussed about in his work Caste Genesis and its mechanism that's been published in 1916, where he talked about endogamy as a mechanism by which caste been maintained, where he talked about purity pollution concept and how women have been kept as a gatekeepers of that purity pollution concept. That is very much there. But to draw one of the examples that had happened very recently in MP, we are talking about intersectionality of caste and gender. One of the Dalit IAS officers he had made a comment saying that reservation will be stopped when the Kanyadana happens. That means he basically saying that the caste will let only and only if you promote intercaste marriage. And do you know what was the response of the oppressor caste towards that particular statement? He been removed from all his responsibilities. Why? Because he talked about the intersectionality of caste and gender. So when we make certain statement, which actually challenges the basic foundation of caste, we've been somehow, somewhere penalized by the political environment and the state mechanism. So how would we go about it? I think that is more important to discuss about. Yeah.
Disha, you want?
Just 2-3 questions very briefly I just wanted to address. One was the question of course, caste and patriarchy that Rehna has obviously addressed really well. I just wanted to point out that intersectionality is really not just about caste and gender coming together. And I would go to basically to Dr. Ambedkar, who to me is the ultimate intersectionalist. Of course, the term Brahminical patriarchy was coined much later, but the intersectional idea of caste and patriarchy, how that comes together, which is through the bodies of women, how caste is enforced and entrenched and reproduced through bodies of women, both Savarna women in a different way. By someone mentioned about how it is about reverence to that sort of order, and on Dalit women's bodies by practicing violence on those bodies. So in that sense, women's bodies therefore become a site and of course also a source of the caste system. So one cannot really answer the question, and thank you for pointing that out, of annihilating caste without really talking about the question of gender. The other question was about the SIR. So we recently filed a petition challenging the Tamil Nadu SIR, and we were essentially really grappling with the same question that Alone sir pointed out, that why on earth was right to vote not made a fundamental right, because the job would have been much easier, because for those of you who are not from the legal background, when you have a provision in the fundamental rights chapter part 3, it is an enforceable provision, right? So you cannot just take away those rights, but unfortunately article 325, 336 universal adult franchise is just a constitutional right, and that's enforceability, and that weight is not there for that article. And we read about Dr. Ambedkar's intervention that he wanted to make. But that brings me to this question of, when Dr. Ambedkar was talking about political democracy, when Dr. Ambedkar was talking about constitutional morality in the Constituent Assembly, especially in his last speech, he talks about how the governing class, even with the best of the constitution, can capture the constitution, right, and constitutional institution. And that's where he talks about how those in power, those who are in the governing class, will have to go with that sort of, or have that sort of constitutional morality. Those who are in the institutions will have to follow certain constitutional conventions, right? And with the ECI's role now and how it has exceeded its powers in the SIR question, we see that constitutional morality, ECI, and other constitutional bodies, we can discuss what are the other constitutional bodies that are doing that, but they are also not being guided by that constitutional morality. So it is very easy to keep the structure of the constitution intact. The real attack is not, to me, for the constitution, it's not an attack from the outside. We are not going to have a separate replaced constitution. We are just going to have processes that are going to hollow out the constitution through constitutional institutions, which are not guided by constitutional morality, and you will see the constitution fall, right, and decay. So, and that hollowing out and that decaying of the constitution is happening even though the structure of the constitution is intact. So that is something that we will have to be wary of on the SIR question. One very small comment on reservations. The history of reservations in India, right from, and I'm not just starting with 1950, I will start before that. There were some states that had reservation like policies. We've also had that discussion in the Roundtable Conference in the South Borough Commission, where there was a demand for communal representation. So we will see that there has consistently been a major pushback from the governing classes against what was then communal representation. Dr. Ambedkar's entire constitutional debate and deliberation and pushing back was against the privileged castes. But it has been a history of reform and retrenchment. The minute there is any kind of reform in terms of reservation, so I'll give one example, which was the Champakandurai Rajan case, the very first reservation case. There was reservation in Tamil Nadu and in educational institution, medical institution. Then it was challenged before the High Court, and the High Court said that reservation violates Article 14. Therefore, they struck down that reservation policy, right? So this was where there was a reform, but there was a retrenchment. And again, immediately you see that Dr. Ambedkar was then, he brought the First Amendment and he introduced Article 15.4 to ensure that this provision is entrenched in the Constitution. So 15.4 gives reservations in educational institutions. Again, a moment of reform. Again, you will see that the judiciary is trying to crack down upon reservation in M.R. Balaji case, where it brought this concept of 50% limit, where you cannot cross 50% limit. So many states that were having more than 50% reservations, they had to bring that down, right? And that question is still pending. The minute Parliament tried to bring in reservation promotion under Article 16.4a, again we saw a retrenchment where the Supreme Court in M. Nagaraj case introduced multiple barriers to implementing reservation and promotion. You have to prove inadequacy in representation. You have to show that reservation and promotion is not going to harm efficiency in administration, and you have to also bring data to show that there is inadequate representation to even implement reservation promotion, which is why we have no reservation promotion despite Article 16.4a being in the Constitution, right? So we will also have to be very vigilant of all these processes that are being introduced through the judiciary that are trying to dilute these constitutional provisions, even though they stay there. On the bare reading of the Constitution, you see, oh, what a wonderful document. We have reservation and promotion. No country in the world has it. But in reality, reservation and promotions is not getting implemented because the judiciary has introduced so many barriers. So that reform and retrenchment has happened for a while, and it will continue to happen.
संक्षेप में ही बात कर रहा हूँ। जाति एक मानसिक बीमारी बन चुकी है और उसको आप ऐसे खत्म नहीं कर सकते हैं। प्रकृति जो है परिवर्तन प्रकृति का नियम है। आप इस देश में कल्चरल कन्फ्लिक्ट्स के पूरा इतिहास है और कल्चरल हेजमनी के माध्यम से पॉलिटिकल पावर गेन किया गया है और इसी के माध्यम से ही ये इसको खत्म किया जा सकता है। मेरी यह हाइपोथेसिस है कि जब तक कल्चरल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन नहीं होगा कोई भी चेंज नहीं होगा। और ये कितना आसान है कहना बहुत मुश्किल है। मैं इस पर पहले भी अभी भी मैं कह रहा हूँ, जब बोल रहा था मैं, वो साथी जो आप बता रहे थे इंडिया अलायंस का, मैं समझ नहीं पाया क्या कह रहे थे, लेकिन मेरा इसमें मानना है कि विदाउट कल्चरल हेजमनी को खत्म किए बिना और उसके बाद पॉलिटिकल पावर के बिना ये सिस्टम पर चोट करना बहुत कठिन है। ये पूरी दुनिया में बीमारी बन चुकी है, जिसका उदाहरण अमेरिका इंग्लैंड की बात कर रहे हैं यहाँ पर। ये खत्म नहीं हो सकता है और ये सबकी ड्यूटी है, क्योंकि हम एक हिपोक्रेटिक सोसाइटी में रहते हैं। हमारे इंटेलेक्चुअल्स, हमारे एकेडमिशियंस बिल्कुल हिपोक्रेट हैं। इसीलिए कोई चेंजेस की संभावनाएं वहां से बिल्कुल नहीं दिखाई देती हैं। वो चेंज कहीं और से आएगा और बड़े पॉलिटिकल जो क्या बोलते हैं सोशल मूवमेंट और पॉलिटिकल मूवमेंट के साथ ही आएगा। और यह मैं आखिरी कंक्लूड करते हुए बात करना चाहता हूं कि जो 2047 में कह रहा था, पिछले 2 दशकों का मैंने जो युवाओं को देखा है, अगले 2 दशकों में जो यूथ आने वाला है और जो समय आने वाला है, मेरा दावा है, जो मेरी हाइपोथेसिस कह रही है कि अगर इन 20 सालों में जिस तरह से समाज और देश जा रहा है, अगर उसी तरह से चलता रहा तो जस्ट इसके उलट होगा तो जो हम चेंज चाहते हैं उससे विपरीत हो जाएगा। और वो विपरीत जब होगा तो दूसरों के लिए बहुत हानिकारक हो जाएगा। इसीलिए इस पर सोचना है कि हम जिस अलोनी साहब जिस करुणा की बात कर रहे हैं, बुद्धिस्ट फिलॉसफी पर ऐसा चेंज चाहते हैं तो हमें अभी से काम करना होगा। ये सोच रहे हैं कि ये हिस्टोरिकली हम चेंज कर देंगे कुछ सिस्टम को, वो ऐसा कदापि नहीं होगा। आने वाला कल जो 20 साल के बाद 100 वर्ष आज़ादी के होंगे, तो यूथ इवेल्युएट करेगा अपने 100 साल के पीछे के इतिहास को, और वह यूथ आज का नहीं होगा, बिल्कुल अलग होगा। हर दिन बदल रहा है समय। तो ये मेरा मानना है कि 2047 के बाद निश्चित तौर पर कोई बड़ा बदलाव आएगा। मैं कुछ नहीं करता अगर धरती बची रही। आखिरी ये है कि अगर धरती पलट जाएगी तब शायद जाके बदले। मैं एक निगेटिव हो सकता है, लेकिन आसान नहीं है खत्म होना, क्योंकि एकदम रग रग में समा चुका है ये। और जो आप बता रहे थे कि ब्राह्मण्स 10,000 ब्राह्मण्स दलित ब्राह्मण्स बन चुके हैं, लाखों बदल जाएंगे, इतने बुद्धिस्ट बन गए, कुछ भी नहीं चेंज आया, उनमें भी कास्टिज्म है। तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ने वाला है। फर्क पड़ेगा पॉलिटिकल पावर से, और पॉलिटिकल पावर तक पहुंचने के सारे रास्ते बंद हैं उनके लिए। जो सफरर है उनके लिए रास्ते बंद हैं। वो पीएम नहीं बन सकता इस देश के अंदर, और जिस दिन पीएम बनेगा चेंज जरूर होगा।
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll just be very brief. Yeah, very brief. This whole overseas problem is that of the discourse. You see what kind of a discourse that has been generated over a period of time by the Westerners as well as by Indians. So largely you have a empirical understanding through imperial discourse and largely through the Brahmanical discourse, and therefore it has become a status quoist, and therefore you can't do anything much unless until you challenge the discourse itself, and you have to tell the world no, it is not. The problem is rooted somewhere else. The whole idea of anybody, you talked about this whole 10,000 Dalits getting converted into Brahmins and all this. I'll give you a counter example. The counter example is, say, for example, the Sompura family who were not Brahmins in Gujarat, but they were the custodian of the Sambrangana Sutradhar text, and then they were not accepted as Brahmins, but they are now accepted as Brahmins, but still they are considered to be the lower caste Brahmins. So the caste is all about hierarchy. Ambedkar made it very clearly, and Ambedkar also said it very clearly that I measure the progress of the society on the status of women, and women becomes the most important part. Then one has to distinguish between Ambedkarite and Ambedkarian. The Ambedkarian thinking is all about belief in constitutional politics and the constitutional morality. And the Ambedkarites are very different. They believe in certain things, and of course, they will always have a different worldview. But at the same time, they will not oppose or they will not kill anyone. See, we never, I proudly say, we never desecrated Gandhi's statues or anybody's statues, whereas the followers of the Vedantics and the Savarnas have always desecrated Ambedkar statue and they dismantle Ambedkar statues. This is very important. And as far as the representation is concerned, this inadequacy through this promotion and all, the Supreme Court asked them the data, and who were ruling? It is the Bahujan Samaj Party and the Samajwadi Party, they were ruling, who refused to give any data. तो तुम क्या एक्सपेक्ट करोगे भाई दूसरों से? पहले अपने आप को सुधारो तब बात करो. Then the whole is whether it is left and all those things. Let me also tell you, the left parties in their convention, national convention that happened sometime in 47 or 48, I don't remember exactly, but it is there in Gail Womer's book, where it says that the SC/STs are the foot soldiers of revolution, therefore we should prevent them from Ambedkar. This has been an agenda of the left. So therefore, I don't believe that the left would have that kind of a liberal left. And last, I must say that the whole idea of, whenever it comes to the discussion of caste, it always boils down to reservation. Reservation is just one small mechanism. It's not the thing. And that is the reason Ambedkar constantly maintained the cultivation of mind, cultivation of cultural ethos. That cultural ethos becomes very important. Caste is a disease of mind. It is not just physical, but largely it is mental. Mentally sick है भाई society. Society को इस mental problem से निकालो, देश सुधर जाएगा. धन्यवाद.
Okay, now, anyway, thank you very much, all of you, for this, patiently. There's a touching 3 hours. I mean, we've been at this. So I'll just quickly conclude that, that in integrating social and cultural transformation with an economic with the economic alternative is also critical. And our tryst with destiny can go on, as has gone on for 76 years. But let us grab this opportunity so that we can redeem our pledge, which has remained unredeemed for so many years, to make the conditions for the last man and woman representing the Adivasis and Dalits, the marginalized and poor people of India, to give unto themselves what is truly theirs. That is the challenge before the people of India. Thank you very much. We just have to take one shot.
Yeah.